It's NBA draft night with Bleacher Report here in New York City. I'm your host, Chris Miles, and that's Seth Davis from CBS Sports, college basketball analyst, and Jonathan Wasserman, Bleacher Report lead scout. And we're here to take you through all of the picks on tonight. The Atlanta Hawks are already on the clock with the first pick in the draft. Of course, this is the fourth time in their history that they've made the #1 overall pick, but the first time since the draft lottery. So Wasserman, saw you yesterday during the mock draft. You had Zach Ricochet going to the Atlanta Hawks with the #1 overall pick. Why do you feel like that will be the selection?
It's just from everything I'm hearing around the team, he sounds like the safe pick for them. And I think safety this year holds a little bit more stock, a little bit more value because of the uncertainty with everybody else. I also think he's a pretty seamless fit for what Atlanta currently has. And, I guess there's still the question of will Trey and DeJounte be there long term? But assuming that they are, assuming that's the plan, Atlanta is not looking to blow it up. Ricochet fits in as your, classic 3-and-D wing. He could play to his strengths right away, catch and shoot guy, finish on the break, defend the other team's wings, and, not do too much because I think right now he really has to improve his off the dribble game, but he could be a little bit more patient in Atlanta. And again, you look down the board, I know Atlanta likes Alex Sarr, but from what I'm hearing, Ricochet has been the guy and still is, a couple minutes up to the draft.
Seth, when I look at Wasserman's big board, it's interesting because he has Ricochet as the 6th best prospect, right? And then I see guys like Klingon and Reed Shepherd. I know what those guys are. Can you tell us more about those guys who he has ahead of Ricochet as prospects?
Well, welcome to the 2024 NBA draft. I mean, we've been saying for a long time, and I know John, covers this intimately year round, that this was going to be a weak draft and certainly at the top of the draft. I actually thought, sort of pre-combine that maybe, Chris, that narrative was a little bit overstated, that people were maybe underrating the top of the draft, particularly the international guys. But the more I talk to scouts and executives these last few weeks, there's just nobody exciting at the top of the draft. I think there are a lot of good players in the draft. Certainly they're going to be players that end up being better than we think. But there's not going to be anybody that you could tell me is going to go #1 that team can look at and say he's a franchise player, he's a definite multi-year all-star. Ricochet is a big scorer. He's a big wing. He's all of 6'8", 6'9", shot 39% from threes. It was in the French league, which is not considered one of the toughest international leagues on the planet. But he very much fits the mold of an NBA player who can play in space. It'd be interesting to see him opposite Trae Young, if that is the pick, because both those guys kind of need the ball in their hands. But Ricochet can play without the ball. He can make catch and shoot threes, and that's a very valuable asset in the NBA these days.
This draft reminds me of several in the past where I'll never forget Anthony Bennett going #1 overall, right? And they're like, oh, this is a weak draft. And then we got Giannis Antetokounmpo out of that draft, right? Or a few years ago, I remember Killian Hayes being listed in some boards like the best prospect. And we got, superstars in that draft, including Tyrese Halliburton, right? So it's always interesting. The night of the draft are coming into it, Wasserman, and then we see what these guys become. You can never tell the level that they're going to be able to take it before the draft.
Yeah, we're just not that good at evaluating players. Let's just be honest here. It's tough. The best evaluators in the world get a lot wrong. And so, particularly this draft. Like, I have Ron Holland #1. It's possible I'm hearing he slips out of the top 10. And
all
so
right.
There's going to be guys who surprise us with their upside once they get to the NBA.
And it looks like Jonathan Wasserman was correct with the #1 overall pick, as you had in your mock draft. Zach Ricochet from France, the #1 overall pick to the Atlanta Hawks. Wasserman.
Yeah, again, it's a safe play, I think. I think there are certainly guys who, and we talk about upside, it's all theoretical. I just don't think he does as many things as potentially an Alex Sarr, who's probably going to go #2 in this draft, but his archetype is very valued. Everybody wants that big wing that could shoot and defend multiple positions. It's a plus that he's crazy athletic. Time will tell whether he kind of improves his off the dribble game. To his credit, he didn't get many opportunities to do it with his current team. He did a lot of run down the floor and get to your corners, get to your wings, and wait for those spot up opportunities and wait for your transition opportunities. And we did see at the junior levels, he can play make, at lower levels we saw it happen at least. But, he's a safe pick. He fits in right away. And I think with Atlanta, you have some questions about, A.J. Griffin and Sadiq Bey. Reece Shea is probably an upgrade in terms of how much better he could be. And I think Atlanta is maybe on a little bit of a time crunch here. They're trying to make a move fast, and Reece Shea put up points in the pro league in the playoffs right away. So he could be a starting guy immediately.
Back-to-back years, a French player goes number one in the NBA draft. Of course, Reece Shea played with Wembanyama in the 2021-2022 season. So, Seth, he's one of those guys that, again, he's coming into the league, and not a lot of people here in America have seen him play. So he's kind of like, when you say a foreign prospect, like foreign to people trying to figure out who he could be. Is there a comp that you might have of Reece Shea coming into this draft?
Maybe Kevin Huerter comes to mind. He's a little bit taller. I think he's got more lateral mobility, lateral quickness than Kevin Huerter. What's interesting is, Reece Shea, his height is listed at 6'8", and his wingspan is 6'9.5". That is not a very good correlation. The scouts and teams like to see a longer wingspan, especially if we're talking about the defensive end. And, you look at the Atlanta Hawks, they rank 28th in the NBA. In defensive scoring, 28th in the NBA in defensive field goal percentage. I don't see Reece Shea helping them in that area. That's why, Was, I really thought that when the Hawks won the lottery, I said, well, they're definitely going to take Alex Sarr, because one thing we know about Alex Sarr is he's a fantastic rim protector, rebounder, switchable defender. I mean, you could put Alex Sarr into the league right now, onto an NBA game right now, and he would be a potential all defensive type player. He certainly has that potential. Offensively, obviously, some question marks, playing the pick and roll game off of Trae Young. I'd just be curious about your thoughts about just the fit with Atlanta, Reece Shea versus Sarr, because that was obviously the choice they had to make. And by the way, as we all know, Sarr didn't even work out with the Hawks, and I'm wondering how much you think that played into this decision.
Well, you're right. Once the lottery played out and the Atlanta Hawks got the number one pick, the first thing I did, and of course Bleacher Report wanted an instant mock draft, was put Alex Sarr number one. I thought he was obviously a number one overall candidate. But yeah, he gave them exactly what they could use, which is, a big switchable, power forward or center. He reminds me defensively of a Mobley. And so that was who I thought they would take. But this is who their scouting department really liked. I mean, Quinn Snyder, Landry Fields, Kyle Korver flew out to his game in the playoffs. So they obviously liked him early, and they went to go see him. And listen, I give the pick a B grade. It's again, if you saw my big board, I have him as the 6th overall player in this draft. But if you're trying to play it safe and you just want to make sure you get a starting caliber player, like, I just wouldn't do it at number one.
Now, there's a key word you use there, and I want to hear from both of you guys on this, but Wasserman, you first. Safe. How is Reece Shea a safer pick than some of the other guys that we see in this draft that you have with a higher ranking?
I think if you put stock into his numbers this year, around 40% from three, 6'9" size for his position, athletic, I just think that's a very safe combination. And to see him score in the playoffs, and by the way, he played his best basketball in the Pro A playoffs in France, it's just kind of a comforting thing. And again, he's going to play to his strengths. He's not going to try and do too much. I just don't see how he's not an immediate quick rotation player. The question with Reece Shea is upside, and when you have the number one pick, you want to go after upside. So I don't know, maybe they felt some pressure at Atlanta that they didn't want to take any chances on guys with more, bust potential. But if the shot is real, which I assume Atlanta believes it is, then he has to be considered a safe pick.
Chris, I think my answer would be around the notion of an elite skill. There are going to be some players in this draft that can do a lot of things pretty well. I think a lot of NBA teams, most NBA scouts would tell you they would rather have a player who can do one thing at a super elite level. Now, again, a lot of this is context. For the number one overall pick, you want someone who's going to be elite in a lot of ways. And some of this is the Wemby hangover, and we got Cooper Flag coming in next year. So again, I think there's going to be a little bit more intrigue as we get through this first round. But if there's going to be one skill that you want your player, your draft pick to be elite at, it's shooting. And I don't think there's any question that Ricochet brings elite level NBA shooting. When you look at his size, when you look at his age, you look at his numbers, there's very little doubt to me that you can put him in an NBA game today, let him play in space, let him play off the ball, and he'll be able to knock down shots for you.
With the second pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the Washington Wizards select Alex Sarr at number 2, the same as Wasserman had on his draft board. So what grade do you give this pick, Wasserman?
I mean, I give this an A-. Again, he's in another draft. I probably don't have him number 2, but in this draft, I understand why you would take him number 2 when you look at who else is on the board. And I think that translates first is the defensive versatility, which is very valuable. And then there's a path to upside if these flashes of three-point shooting, pull-up jumpers, turnarounds from the post, open floor ball handling. Like, he did not do that every game, but he flashed it. And so you have to hope over time that he could put it together, sharpen each one of these skills he kind of flashed in doses. And if he does, then you have a very interesting player kind of in the Evan Mobley archetype, maybe even Jaren Jackson, if he starts to really unload from outside. But he's a little bit too raw offensively for me to call a typical number 2 overall pick. But again, when you look at who else there is to choose from, I think I love the gamble on the upside, and I think the defensive versatility creates a floor where even if the offense doesn't develop, he's still a valuable piece with the ability to block shots and switch out in the perimeter.
Back-to-back fringe players going 1 and 2. And remember, the Wizards drafted a fringe player in the lottery last year in Bilal Coulibaly. So they just traded Denny Avdia, so that's also happening too. They're back in this draft at 14 to the Portland Trail Blazers. So there's a real youth movement with these Washington Wizards. There's a lot of rumors that they're going to try to trade up even more in this draft. So how does he fit, Seth, when you look at the rest of this team, like Corey Kispert, Bilal Coulibaly, and now Alex Sarr as this youth movement in Washington?
Well, if I may play the sympathy card, I'm a lifelong Washington Bullets Wizards fan, DMV resident. Very proud of my team for tanking for this particular draft. That's
sarcasm.
The life of a Wizards fan. Because who was in the draft last year that you would want to tank for? I can tell you that Wizards fans and the Wizards in general should be very excited about this pick. I think Alex Sarr is the best prospect in this draft. If I didn't have any players, was just starting a team with any player in the draft, I would start with Sarr. First of all, I mentioned this about Ricochet, so he's a guy who measured 6'11", 3/4, but he's got a 7'4" wingspan. He led the NBL in Australia in block rate. He is an elite defender today. And even though he's only about a 28% three-point shooter, he did make a few threes. And when you look at his stroke, looks pretty good. I mean, it looks like something that he could develop. I mean, I don't think any of us would have ever thought that someone like Brook Lopez would be able to score anywhere from 5 feet outside the basket. Kawhi Leonard couldn't make anything outside of 5 feet when he played for San Diego State. This kid is long, he's bouncy, he's a great competitor. He's been around. You talk about him being from France, played at Overtime Elite, played for Real Madrid, played for Perth in the NBL. So he's been exposed to a lot of different styles of play. The NBL is a pretty high level of basketball, so it's not like you're doing this against nobodies. And he's all upside. He runs, he jumps, he's bouncy, he's long, he works hard. And whatever's going on in the country of France, they seem to be cranking out some really, really good basketball players right now. So, hey, as a Wizards fan, I'm absolutely amped for this pick. I think he's going to be a very effective starter on a playoff caliber team in the unlikely event that the Wizards ever get back to the playoffs. Yeah,
French players going 1, 1, and 2, so the top 3 picks in the last 2 drafts. And it's crazy to see that the Washington Wizards, who, it's been 11 years since they've drafted this high in a draft when they got Otto Porter, Bradley Beal, and John Wall. So they're hoping to have another group like that, starting with Alex Sarr. So let me go right back to you, Seth. Some sleepers you may have in this draft is we're still in the early stages, but on the back end of the first round, there could be some guys with some impact. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, so we're not ready to get to these guys yet, although, I almost listed Dalton Connect as a sleeper, even though I think he probably is going to end up going 5th to the Pistons. But I look at guys like KJ Simpson is a point guard from Colorado, who I think in the combine played himself to the borderline of the first round. You see Kevin McCullough there to me. To me, Chris, when guys are dominant in college, and before Kevin McCullough got injured, he was headed for an All-America type of season. I've seen him listed, middle, bottom of the second round. If he is healthy, and that's certainly a legitimate concern, I think he's going to have a solid NBA career, kind of like a Josh Hart as a plug-and-play guy playing different positions. And, we'll keep talking about sleepers as the night goes on.
And with the third overall pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, Wasserman is 3 for 3 from his mock draft so far. Reed Sheppard out of the University of Kentucky going to the Houston Rockets. Wasserman, what grade do you give this pick?
I give this an A. I mean, I'm a big Reed Sheppard fan. I think he's a top 3 prospect in this draft. I think sometimes we overanalyze measurements, athletic ability. He's so skilled. He's so intelligent. I hear all these great things about him off the floor in terms of work ethic, how much he studies the game, and obviously his feel for the game is unteachable. And so I know that one of the big debates with Reed Sheppard, again, is upside. Everybody knows that he could shoot, that he could pass. The question is, does he have any star potential at 6'1" in socks without much length? I think he's one of those guys who's going to defy the traditional laws of upside that says a guy like him can't be a star, the way we said about Jalen Brunson or Tyrese Halliburton, because they're not, super quick or not super explosive. This is an A pick. Not only do I love the player, but I love the fit. I think Amen Thompson is the perfect backcourt made for him, assuming that he is the long-term starter there. And, with Amen Thompson, he's a guy who's so good at getting to spots and creating. He struggles to shoot, and then you have Reed Sheppard to kind of complement him with his floor-stretching range. And so I really just love the way they kind of play off each other's strengths and weaknesses. And again, we have to look at, when we grade these players, who else is on the board. And to me, he is the best fit. And I wouldn't say the best prospect available, because I am a sucker for Ron Holland. But I believe I have Reed Sheppard number 2 on my board. And so I'm very, very okay with this pick. And again, I like the fit in Houston.
Seth, all of those things that he said was great. And then there's just a number on my screen. I see 52% from three-point range. This kid really shot 52% from three-point range going into the NBA. And then also saw all the games with at least 5 steals. I mean, when I just looked at who he is on paper, I think this is a great pick for the Houston Rockets. An accolade that I was told about him: best perimeter defender and best shooter in the draft. Seth, how true are those two things about Reed Sheppard?
In terms of his perimeter defense, he's much more of a steal guy, passing lane guy, than he is necessarily a ball stopper. So that might be the only wrinkle. But, I'm with you guys on this. I mean, this is a terrific pick. I'm old enough to remember when John Calipari was trying to decide whether Reed Sheppard was good enough to play for Kentucky. This was the summer going into his junior season of high school. He obviously really wanted to play for Kentucky. Both of his parents, dad and mom, were outstanding basketball players at Kentucky. So he was highly motivated in that regard. The Commonwealth, the fans really wanted him there. Took some time for him to think that he was good enough. And then I saw him play at a couple of AAU tournaments going into his senior year of high school. And again, my question was, is he good enough to play at Kentucky? And I looked at him and said, I think he's pretty good. I think I can see him playing at Kentucky, being a good player. The idea that he was 1 year away from being the number 3 pick in the NBA draft, I promise you guys, it did not enter anybody's mind, least of all his. And maybe that's a big reason why he's here. And you talk about him shooting 52% from 3, being a terrific steals guy, passing guy, playing with other guys. He didn't start, and neither did Rob Dillingham, which is a little bit maybe speaks to why John Calipari is no longer the coach at the University of Kentucky. But, he's the kind of player you can put the ball in his hands. You can take it out of his hands. He knows how to play with other players. He knows how to play the game. And look, he's young. He just finished his freshman year in college. He's going to get better. He really cemented this pick, as you guys know, at the Combine during the agility testing. He had one of the highest vertical leaps at the Combine. Nobody was expecting that. Obviously, his shooting numbers were terrific, but his physical agility, quickness, and vertical leap numbers were elite. And once that was the case, it erased not maybe all of the questions about him, but certainly most of them, and paved the way for him to be picked where he is today. I think it's a solid. And by the way, when you look at Houston, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, they've got a lot of wings. A lot of guys like to have the ball in their hands. So he's going to have to figure out a way to fit into that and not necessarily be a takeover guy from day one.
Who does he remind you of? Wasserman, you go first, and Seth, jump right in.
Oh man, I've had trouble coming up with a good comp all year, and I've had scouts ask me also. I think a safe comparison, and this isn't a knock because Dante DiVincenzo is not a number 3 overall type guy, but I think at least early in his career, that's who he's going to be. DiVincenzo, by the way, was 3rd in the NBA in three-point makes this season, and he kind of just gives you that shot making confidence, secondary playmaker. I think you can use him in ball screen situations. A question I get all the time is he a point guard? Is he a 2 guard? I really don't think it matters anymore. It matters more of who he's paired with. And so I think early on, especially for a Rockets team that has a lot of mouths to feed now, there's a lot of weapons on that roster. So regardless of who they're taking, you're not going to get a high usage guy. But I think early on he's going to be a flamethrower off the bench who just comes in and gives you a little bit of a spark. And Seth talked about the athletic testing stuff. And also the fact that, he's not a great on-ball defender, but the athleticism shows on defense. His steal and block percentages were off the charts for a guy his size, particularly the shot blocking. I think that says more about his athletic ability than it does about his real defensive upside. But he's gonna give you some surprise bursts off the bounce that a lot of these Kentucky guards over the years don't get to show because they're playing with 4 other 5-star guys. And we talk all the time about Reed Sheppard coming off the bench. I think he's going to do things in the NBA that he just didn't have the minutes and usage to do at Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think he's one of these guys, John, who I think will really flourish. Obviously the level of talent in the NBA is considerably higher than what it is in college, but stylistically, in a lot of ways, it's easier to play in the NBA. Someone like Reed Sheppard, who's so good at the open floor. He's great with the ball in his hands on the open floor. He can pull up real quick for a 3-point shot. He can fire pinpoint passes, or he can be that guy that runs to the 3-point line while Amen Thompson brings the ball up, or somebody, Fred VanVleet, and just plays in space. So and of course he won't. Whenever he's on the court, it's not like he's going to get the best defender on the other team guarding him as well. So I just think it's a solid pick, and you know what he's going to do to bring to the franchise. You know what he's going to bring to your locker room. This kid's just a winner.
And 4 for 4 from his mock draft right now. The pick is in for the San Antonio Spurs. Stephon Castle, number 4 in the draft, going to the San Antonio Spurs, the national champion out of UConn, Wasserman.
Yeah, I'll give it a B+. I mean, he's just a solid player. I think there's some debate on who he's going to be in the NBA. Is he going to be that big 6'6" point guard that he was in high school? Or is he going to be that jack of all trades, ultimate glue guy that he was for UConn? Either way, you're getting a good player. And I think with San Antonio, they need kind of flexible guys. They're still early in this pre-draft, in their the rebuilding process. And I know everybody wants them to draft a point guard, but you can't just invent one out of thin air. I mean, I think they're thinking best player available. I know a lot of people out there who do think he is a top 5 prospect in this draft. And, the maturity, the intangibles, that all kind of goes with San Antonio's culture. And so it's hard to knock this pick. I do think there are some questions about his upside, but I think if you're just looking for a cornerstone who's going to, I know it's a cliche, impact winning and find ways to influence games in different ways. Yeah, I mean, how could you not like Stephon Castle?
So, Seth, there's just 2 things we got to look at here, right? Watching Wembanyama last year, and we were all on Wemby watch, and you watch him go up and down the court, and you think, well, someone just passed him the ball. Can someone defend on the perimeter? Can Castle do those 2 things to have an immediate impact in the NBA? Because that's truly what the San Antonio Spurs need.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's interesting. I just didn't quite realize I was joining the Ron Holland fan club tonight. I am a member of the Ron Holland fan club. Maybe you guys are the charter members. But, Holland has been supposedly for his level sinking a little bit in the draft because he shot 24% from three in the G League, while Stephon Castle shot 27% as a freshman at UConn, and with a much lower usage rate, to your point. So that's the big question. Look, he made 2 3-pointers in the semifinals against Alabama. Nate Oates played off him, said let the kid do what he wants, and he made 2 3-pointers early in the game, changed the dynamics of that game. Alabama had to adjust its defense, and then the route was on. So he's shown the ability to do that. Shot it well in the open drills at the combine. At least didn't scare anybody off. But again, a scout made this point to me recently when I was talking about all these prospects that Castle played on a championship team where he wasn't the guy, right? He played with Cam Spencer and Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan, and Dan Hurley used his bench. He was a really, really good piece on the best team by far, the best team in college basketball. So he has shown that he knows how to play with other players. For him, it starts at the defensive end, and then it starts at the attacking. Offensively, he's a rim attacker, much less than he is a jump shooter. And the jump shooting piece eventually is going to have to come. But when you talk about both in terms of the personnel that a team has and also the culture within a franchise, Stephon Castle is a beautiful fit with San Antonio because he's going to come in and guard. He's not going to demand anything. He's going to want to be a piece. We all know who the best player is on that team, who needs to be the best player. And so everybody's got to figure out a way to play around Wemby, and I think that's the attitude that Castle is going to have. But, upside, I think his upside is as big as any player. I was starting to hear some rumblings that he could possibly go number 1 overall. That's how excited some people are about his upside. If he could be a decent three-point shooter right now, not a good one, a decent three-point shooter, he probably would have gone number 1 overall. I think the shooting piece was enough of a concern that he fell to number 4, but this young man has a very bright and long future in the NBA, absolutely.
Wasserman, something I saw on the previous graphic was big guard, right? And that's something that when teams are drafting and they're building their whole unit, and you go, okay, Victor Wembanyama, we know he's going to have size at whatever position on the floor, always going to be one of the biggest guys. You look at the Boston Celtics winning the championship, Derek White, Drew Holiday, big guards, Castle listed at 6'6" and 210 as a 19-year-old. It feels like a big deal for him to kind of be the potential head of that snake defensively and creating for Victor Wembanyama and that group going forward.
Yeah, that's a big part of the selling point to him because it's not, creating and scoring and shooting right now. I think it's using his body to play through smaller guards. And then defensively, he should be a big plus on the defensive end with the way he, is physical and slides his feet and can guard multiple positions. So, yeah, the archetype is obviously attractive, but again, to really get to maximize his ceiling or whatever, or to bust through, the glue guy role that he plays, he's got to improve as a shooter, and he's got to show that he can really create advantages off the dribble. But yeah, being a 6'6" guard, every team is going to love that.
And Seth, winning should matter, right? National champion as a freshman, making big plays in big moments. That has to be something that NBA executives noticed in this kid.
Yeah, no question. And like I said, that means being able to play with other good players because you can't win championships by yourself. You can't win championships having an off-the-charts usage rate. And in terms of his attitude and his work ethic, obviously being coached by Dan Hurley every day, you're going to learn a lot about habits. But he had those habits coming in. He was never a sleeper, a highly ranked recruit. Got a little banged up injury-wise early in the season, so he didn't quite have the preseason they wanted. And then he missed a couple of games early on, and then it took some time for him to get back in the flow. And then once he did, you could just see how good he was. So, again, to Wass's point, you can't be a shooting guard / small forward in the NBA and not being at least a respectable three-point shooter. You guys know that. I know that. Certainly he knows that. The Spurs know that. And to me, outside shooting, again, we're going to have this exact same conversation when Ron Holland gets picked here in a few picks, that to me, the shooting is the one thing that's the most learnable and the most teachable at the NBA level. It's not automatic, but if you put in the time and you put in the reps, then you're going to get better. You may not, end up being the best shooter of all time, but if you're going to be on that wing, you've got to be able to knock down three-point shots. It's going to be hard to really get major minutes on a playoff level, championship level NBA team if you cannot knock down that three-point shot. I'm going to be curious to see how that develops. Another guy, by the way, Kyle Kuzma, if you look at his three-point shooting when he was in college, it was around 34%. That was nothing that augured a great NBA three-point shooter. By the time he got a month into his rookie season in the NBA, he was a great NBA three-point shooter, and he's made a lot of money with that skill. I would not be surprised to see the same thing happen eventually with Stephon Castle.
And the San Antonio Spurs, they do have 2 picks in the top 10, 4 and 8. And so, Wasserman, projecting ahead, do you think Ron Holland could go to the Spurs if he's still on the board at 8? Because I look at that as being a phenomenal draft if they're able to pull that off, especially Holland being a Texas native, such a stout defender, and a kid who scored over 20 points with the G League Ignite.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets interesting because you'd be adding 2 below average shooters to a team that finished 28 in the NBA in three-point percentage. Now, I'm all about taking the best player available, regardless of anything else. I just can't picture them doing it. And honestly, it sounds like me and Seth are higher on Ron Holland than most of the NBA teams that I've spoken to. So I wouldn't bet on them taking Holland.
Well, he's off the board.
Whoa.
The first miss on your mock draft is a hit for the Detroit Pistons. They select Ron Holland out of the G League Ignite. Wasserman, what say you?
All right, this is an A+ for me.
Hey.
And this just like makes me not want to put stock into anything I hear in the weeks leading up to the draft, because everything I'm hearing is that Matas was clearly ahead of Ron Holland. But let's just focus on Ron here, who I think has the chance to be one of the best prospects in the draft, if not number one. Crazy explosive athlete in the open floor, who I think even without the skill development that we've seen is going to get you offense, going to get you scoring. He put up 20 a game in the G League at 18 years old, and he only shot 24% from 3. I mean, what happens if that number from 24% goes to 32%, which is very possible? And so, of course, you love the athleticism, the motor, the ability to guard wings and stuff. But why he, to me, is the number one prospect is because of the improvement I've seen with his ball handling, his creation, just a very, a guy who didn't have that in his bag coming in. I mean, I had him number one coming in, and I wasn't buying the self-creation skill. And this year I saw him get to his spots, change direction, finish, make adjustments inside the arc, things that he's just evolved a lot. And so I'm going to bet on him continually evolving and just get that 3% three-point percentage to a respectable number. I said this on the show before. I think sometimes we put too much stock into shooting percentage and not shot-making potency. Like, he can make tough jumpers. Luka doesn't shoot a high percentage from 3, or at least I don't remember what it was now, but early in his career. But he can make a lot of jumpers. So, I think other teams might have put too much stock into his three-point percentage, and I'm buying everything else in this, and I'm going to bank on him improving his shot just enough.
Seth, I got to say, I feel like the draft just started now. It's a jolt of energy because I really see in 8 to 10 years from now, we go, this is potentially the best player in the draft, and him falling to the Pistons, and I go, okay, Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, like, they have athleticism already, and it feels like he could be the guy to help them start to propel and get out of this basement of losing every year.
Well, so I get to be a college basketball reporter. You guys cover the NBA, and the benefit to me there is I did not have to watch the Pistons this year. So my sympathies to the two of you.
Or the Wizards. Or the Wizards.
Or the Wizards, that's right. I would check out the Warriors and the Suns and the Lakers and the Spurs on my late night TV and watch Chris in the studio there in Atlanta. And but I'm starting to sense you guys might be overrating Ron Holland here a little bit. I don't think he's the best player in this draft. He is a great athlete. There's no question. He brings a lot of athletic skills, and he could improve perhaps, but he was a horrific three-point shooter. And you look at the Pistons numbers, they were 26th in the NBA in three-point shooting. They were 27th in scoring. They were 22nd in assists per game. They were a horrible offensive team. So I'm not sure what their plans are if they're looking. I mean, obviously, it's a long-term play when you're talking about a guy who is 19, 20 years old, only played 1 year professionally at a high school. But if you're a team that is having trouble scoring and you draft a non-shooting wing with the 5th pick in the NBA draft, when somebody like Dalton Connect is sitting right there and can immediately open things up for you, I got to question it a little bit, I'll be honest.
Wow. Wasserman, I think we have our first debate. I look at it like this as NBA execs look at it. Ron Holland's 18 years old. Dalton Connect is 23 years old, and we have a trade. Charlotte is trading back from the 6th pick to the 9th pick with the Memphis Grizzlies. Clearly, Wasserman, the Grizzlies, who had a year just derailed with injuries, have their eyes on a specific player. Who do you think they're looking at here to move up 3 spots in the draft?
I mean, it's got to be Donovan Clingham. I mean, he fits with what they need. I know that they've been looking into this idea earlier in the draft process. I think they thought he'd be gone by now, and they weren't willing to move up top 5. But it's got to be Clingham. I think is clearly the best player on the board, and somebody who can, help them right away and give them some beef down low, because Jaren Jackson Jr., as skilled as he is, he doesn't rebound. He's not a muscle in the middle, and Clingham just would make too much sense here.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, because coming into the draft, a lot you had on your mock the Clingham going to the Hornets at 6, and you kind of thought like teams would be going for him. So it may be premature, but Seth, Clingham, clearly a great college player, 2-time national champion. Seems like he's going to be a very good NBA player.
Yeah, and he's the guy, when you look at in terms of how he fits on this team, obviously John Morant. Donovan Clingham, for a guy at 7'2", can really change ends. I mean, he is a terrific athlete. He's obviously huge, and he has shown the ability to shoot the ball a little bit. I would have not been shocked to see Clingham go number 1 overall. I'm sure Was was hearing the same chatter that, maybe he, one scout that I talked to called him the safest pick in the draft. And I can see why, because, again, he's an immediate rim protector, great switchability at the defensive end. I mean, if he got switched out onto a point guard or a shooting guard for segments of a possession behind the three-point line, I think he could handle that because of the way he moves his feet and because of his length. And I think that offensive game is going to come. So I think he can play the pick and roll with Morant as well as running the floor, and Jaren Jackson and Desmond Bane. I think it's a good fit, solid pick for the Grizzlies here at number 6.
So apparently the tweet was an actual mistake. Charlotte is working on a trade back to number 9, so that has not happened yet. It's something that's in the works right now, but where there is smoke, there is fire. So we do understand that there seems to be some activity around one of the better prospects in this draft. And what we're seeing is every team is going for a bit of size these days, right? Because you got to figure out Nikola Jokic, 3 MVPs in the last 4 years, and in 1 year he didn't win MVP, won Finals MVP, right? Victor Wembanyama on the come up, the kind of player he is. So you're going to need competitive bigs to be able to try to defend. And there's just tremendous value because, Wasserman, you're not going to get that for more than maybe 3 or 4 players in any given draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Clingan, he's a guy who can, unlike anyone else really on the board, can change the culture, change the identity, I should say, of your team, right? I mean, I think that's what he did with UConn, and that's what I think he could do for an NBA team at 7'2", 280, 7'7" wingspan. I mean, he can turn a mediocre defensive team into a good one. I mean, not many other players that are left on the board can seemingly have that type of impact. And so, yeah, I mean, getting a big guy, I feel like times have changed a little bit. Remember, first it was you need a big guy who can shoot, and then you need a big guy who can play make. I think we're kind of back to seeing teams value the Rudy Goberts of the world, and those kind of those classic rim protectors, and Clingham is clearly that type of guy. And again, I just think his potential impact on a team is going to be greater than anybody else left on the board here.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see Matas Buzelis on the board right now because it was almost a consensus mock draft that he was going to go to the Pistons at 5. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. And Charlotte is selecting Tidjane Salaün. It's the 3rd French player taken in the top 6, and certainly Salaün, this is higher than he was on many mock drafts. What do you make of this pick, Wasserman?
I'm giving this a B minus. I think it's a reach. I mean, I get why he's kind of been a hot name during this pre-draft process, but I wouldn't do it. Let's talk about the positives here. He's 6'9", 6'10", 18 years old, and he made 73s this year. And in terms of his physical tools and his movement, he should be a good defender. Um, I'm just not so sure, just based on the eye test, how much I'm buying him being a knockdown shooter in the NBA, and he really doesn't give you much else offensively. He rarely puts the ball on the floor. He was one of the worst finishers below the rim, just based on the numbers. He really, really struggled to finish layups in the half court. And again, he didn't rebound, he didn't pass. So you're really banking on him being an elite shooter and pairing that with defense. But I think I don't see as much upside as maybe you would think an 18, 19-year-old guy with that with that skill set and his size. I don't see that translating to upside, but yeah, no, I give this a B minus. This is a bit of a reach for me, and I could see why maybe they were looking to trade down and get him, because I'm sure they could have gotten him a couple picks later. So I guess we have to find out more about what happened with those trade conversations.
Again, if you look at the Charlotte Hornets draft the past couple of years, LaMelo Ball, obviously Rookie of the Year. Brandon Miller had an incredible rookie season. And you think they've been drafting well. But Seth, this does feel like a team that, I mean, you're in ACC country. Maybe go get yourself a college player. I don't know, Dalton Connect here, right? Like someone you think a bit more proven that can come in and play. Are you surprised by this pick?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised and not particularly a fan of it. I'm with Was. I mean, you were talking about Researche at number one, Chris, and not being real excited about it. To me, he's a worse version of Researche because he's, kind of someone that he's not a great athlete, but he's a long wing, outside shooter. But he shot under 32%. From three-point range in his league this season. And then in terms of his, measurements at the European Combine, he measured 6'8" and 3/4 inches without shoes, 7'1.5" wingspan. So, a little bit higher than his height, which you'd like to see, but he's not a super long guy. He's not going to bring you a whole lot at the defensive end. He's not a great finisher at the rim. The one thing that he really does is score at the perimeter, and he doesn't do that at a very efficient level. So, we'll see. Obviously, a chance to get better. Obviously, he's got some bounce to him, some agility. You can certainly see the upside there, but he's got a lot of blanks to fill in, where someone like Donovan Clingan, I think on this team just does not have that strong five position who can switch out defensively, finish at the rim, protect the rim defensively. I just think Clingan would have been a better choice.
So, Wasserman, the best comp for Salon, because he's someone that, anyone watching this right now, they probably haven't seen him before. So who's the best NBA comp to him?
Obi Toppin with more defensive upside. I mean, obviously Obi was a lot different in college, but when he moved to the NBA, his role had to change, and he's pretty much a guy who stands around the arc now and hits threes, and then uses his athleticism as a play finisher. Now, he's probably a negative defender, where Salon has the chance to be a positive defender, but I think their roles offensively are going to be very, very similar. But yeah, of course, Salon is, Obi was drafted at 22, and I think Salon's still 18. So there's obviously a lot more room for him to evolve and turn into a different player. But early on in his career, he's going to go to Charlotte, and he's going to give you, energy, athleticism, and spot-up shooting, just not much else. And it's hard for me to really evaluate him defensively. He made a lot of good plays, but playing a full-time role in the NBA is just a little bit different than it was in France. So I'm still in wait-and-see mode on where he is defensively. He has the defensive tools and all the things you need to be a good defender, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good defender. So we'll see how he develops over the next couple of years. He's a bit of a high-risk, high-reward type of guy, but yeah, Obi with some defensive potential was my comp.
So I think we need to look at this 7th pick here and note a few things, right? So the Portland Trailblazers traded out of the 14th pick, and they added Deni Avdija to their roster. They also sent Malcolm Brogdon to the Washington Wizards, right? And the pick is in. Let's see who else they added. Donovan Clingan at number 7, the two-time national champion that we've already waxed poetically about. Wasserman, What do you think of this pick by the Portland Trailblazers?
I mean, at 7, this has to be an A. I mean, right? This is clearly the best prospect available. I think they needed a meaner defensive presence around the basket. Now the conversation is going to be, what do you do with DeAndre Ayton? Do you just play Donovan Clingan as a backup, which you don't really want to have or use a 7th overall pick on? So there's a lot of things that Portland will have to sort out here. I mean, Portland has, I think Ayton's on a pretty big contract. So, yeah, I mean, it's still, I'm all about taking the best prospect available, and I don't see how. Right, Seth said somebody called him the safest pick in the draft. Like I could see that as an argument because at with his measurements and just watching him produce at every level every time he's in a game, he's going to give you the easy baskets. He's going to give you offensive rebounds. He's obviously going to give you rim protection. I think he's a better passer than maybe the numbers suggest. And maybe the biggest takeaway I had from this pre-draft process, just from a scouting's perspective, was he can make jumpers. I know he didn't have to do it at Connecticut with all the, Caravan and Spencer and Newton there. But from what I saw, just using my own eye test, he was like stroking it as if if you were watching for the first time, you think that this guy makes threes normally. So if that becomes a part of his game, then he does have the chance to be maybe the best prospect in this draft. But I'm curious to see how Portland plays this in terms of playing time, roles, and then eventually, do you have to make a change here to get the most out of him?
That's a great point that Wasserman makes. So I got to go to you on this, Seth. I think of Sanogo last year winning the national championship with Clingan, and then Clingan winning the national championship again without Sanogo on the floor. How is he a different player playing with a guy who won, most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament or the Final Four the previous year, and then playing without him in the front court?
Well, first of all, to me, this is, I don't know if you can call someone going 7th a steal, but I think they're going to be sending thank you notes to the Hornets. And it's interesting to me, the Hornets' best big man is Mark Williams. And so here's a team in Portland. They do have a DeAndre Ayton, so now they have a decision to make. But, as Was said, you go for the best player that you can at number 7. And to answer your question, Chris, the biggest difference with Clingan this year was his condition, his strength, and his health. And it was a little bit tenuous early in the season because he was having some foot problems. He missed a lot of the preseason. He started to play. They shut him down for a couple of weeks. When big guys have foot problems, it's a major red flag because you have to make that decision. Do you go in there and fix it surgically, in which case he's done for the season, or do you try to play through the pain, maybe, run the risk of doing some more damage? Our feet are not built to be carrying this kind of weight. But, once he got healthy and once he got strong, he was the best big man outside of Zach Edey in college basketball. And it doesn't take a genius to see his upside long term in terms of being an NBA 5-man because he can defend out on the perimeter. That's the number one thing that big guys have to do to be able to be on the floor, is to be able to up wings, play away from the basket, not full-time, obviously. And then offensively, he's got a lot of tools in his cupboard, man. I just think this is a really good pick. You're getting a winner. You're getting a guy who can go into an NBA game right now and help you beat a really good team, but you're also getting a guy who's got a lot of room to improve and who's got a lot of upside. Absolutely love this pick at number 7.
Wasserman, you brought up something very particular in his game, his passing ability, because Scoot Henderson struggled a bit in his rookie season to score and to find his shooting rhythm. It seems like he could use a big man that could do that. And also, if you're out west and you're battling, whether it's Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic, you need a big that you can put on the floor and stand up to those guys. I mean, this just feels like a great pick for the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, I think we'll see more passing in the NBA. Again, with Connecticut, they're so loaded. But and it's such a plus to have a big man that can pass. That really takes some of the pressure off the point guard. And yeah, you're right. Like Scoot's more of a scoring ball handler. I know he's a point guard, but he's a scorer first. So to get passing from another position is certainly a plus. And I think we're going to eventually start to see, as he gets more comfortable and gets more freedom, we're going to start to see him do a couple things that he didn't do in college. Maybe some stuff more away from the basket.
All right, there are 7 prospects off the board. Let's take a look at guys who are left on the board and the best prospects that are available now. Devin Carter, See, Jared McCain, a guy, Mr. NCAA tournament. Rob Dillingham. We know what happens with Kentucky guards that fall a little bit later in the draft, end up becoming all-stars. That list is very long. Modest Buzelis, Wasserman, I guess I want to go there first. Or you know what? We talked to him earlier. Nikola Topic. This is a guy that we saw as a top 5 prospect, an international prospect, but is kind of falling with the knee injury. How far do you think he could fall in this draft, considering how good of a prospect he was listed as before the knee injury?
I mean, I can't imagine he falls too far. I think at some point in this draft, he's just, again, the best player available, and the team is going to say, I don't really care about getting an immediate contributor next year. Not many guys, at 13, 14, 15 are going to impact my winning next season. So I don't know how long he falls. I also haven't seen the medicals. I haven't really heard any certainty around the severity of the partially torn ACL or what it's going to take to rehab it. But yeah, before the injury, he makes a lot of sense for San Antonio. I think in every mock draft I ever put out, I kind of linked them together because of the Spurs' need for a setup man. That's kind of what I bank on with Topic, is a guy who can just create easy shots for teammates. There are more questions about, will the scoring translate? He's not the greatest at creating separation for himself, and he was a 30% three-point shooter. But at 6'6", with his, he can get to spots. He could put a lot of pressure on the rim. He's a good finisher, and he was a very good live dribble passer. So that's what I expected to translate. But it's hard for me to really have any strong, confident opinion on where he slips because I haven't heard any specifics about his knee or recovery.
So obviously the Spurs took Stephen Castle at number 4. They're back on the board at 8. Seth, is there anyone on your board that you like? I know you said Dalton Connect a few times, but for the San Antonio Spurs to choose to pair with Castle and Wembanyama as they in Devin Vassell as well to try to build their future.
Yeah, Dalton Connect. To me, I think he's the best college player in the draft. This notion that someone at 22 is a finished product. I mean, I barely remember 22. He's got a lot of improving to do. He's got a lot of growing to do, especially on the defensive end. And I think he'll be a good defender because he's a good athlete. He's not a great lateral movement guy. He's never going to be your defensive stopper, but he's going to be, whenever he's in the game, he's going to be guarding the second or third best perimeter player on the court. And I think he'll do an okay job at that. This kid is an absolute bucket. And when you look at the Spurs in terms of the three-point shooting, really, David Duke, Doug McDermott, Raekwon Gray. I mean, these are not great three-point shooters. You mentioned Devin Vassell. He was a 37% three-point shooter. I think Dalton Connect would be very, very good here, but it sounds like that's not what happened.
Nope. Watch out for Kentucky. They are some Wildcats. San Antonio selecting Rob Dillingham at 8. And according to Shams Charania, he could be moved to Minnesota, according to his sources. So, Wasserman, tell us what you think of this pick, if it is San Antonio, and also if it's for Minnesota.
Wow. I think he's in the conversation for best prospect available. I think team fit's going to be important with him because of the defensive concerns. So we'll see what happens at Minnesota. Man, if they just get another big-time scorer to either start or bring off the bench, either way, he's just offensive firepower. I think I love him in the 6-man role where you don't have to worry about whether he's a point guard, whether he's a 2 guard. He could just play to his strengths. I guess I'll give this a B plus. A lot of people, whoa, we got pictures falling off the wall. So somebody doesn't.
They wanted that A. They wanted the A plus there for Dillingham. Those are Kentucky fans coming at you.
The ghosts in the room are not happy with the pick or the grade, but he's. We know what he could do. He's been around for a long time. I remember watching him at the U16s with Biba. He is just your classic microwave bucket getter. I think we have to find out more about how much he's going to develop as a passer, a decision maker. And is he going to get crushed on defense at 164 pounds? But if you kind of put him in a 6-man role to play to his strengths, I really like that fit there.
Well, it's certainly great for Dillingham to be going to a team of this caliber where he's not going to be asked to carry things, which is, the 8th pick in the draft often is put in that position when they're not quite ready for it. I will tell you, quite frankly, I am not a big Dillingham guy because he is a pure two. There's really nothing that he's shown so far that he can be an effective playmaker. That doesn't mean he's got to be a full-time point guard. I don't know that there really are any more full-time point guards in the NBA, at least the way we traditionally think about that. But I didn't see a lot of playmaking skills from him during the season at Kentucky. And he measured, as you guys know, he measured super small at the combine. I mean, he was 6'1.5" of that shoes, 164 pounds. That's super light. You don't find many, if any, I wouldn't think, two guards, pure two guards in the NBA with that kind of physical profile. And then defensively, it was hard to tell if he wasn't good at it or he wasn't interested in it, or maybe it was a combination thereof. Because when you looked at Kentucky's numbers, their efficiency numbers defensively, they were a considerably worse team in the lineups that Dillingham was on the floor. So, the one thing that he can certainly do is score the basketball. His degree of difficulty, if that was a factor, he would have had an even higher scoring average. Again, Dillingham and Shepherd, two of the top 8 picks in the NBA draft, both did not start at Kentucky. Might be why they didn't make it past the first round. So I'm interested to see it. Again, I'm not a big Dillingham guy. I'm not crazy about him going to 8, but that's partly because at 8, normally you're looked to carry a higher load. If he's going to go 8 and then end up at Minnesota, then I think he's going to be in a pretty good situation to be that spark off the bench and take his time growing into the role.
Wasserman, I think the two stats that jump off the page when I look at it, 47% from the field, 44% from three-point range. And I think at two comps, Lou Will or maybe Jamal Crawford. Do you think those are fair comps, or are those a little bit too lofty for him coming into the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lou Will is kind of the best case. I think the worst case is like a Bones Highland. These are just frail. They have such little margin for error because of the lack of playmaking, the lack of defense, and the shot diet is just, he takes a lot of tough shots, which is why it's so surprising that he was so efficient this year. You wonder if any of it is a little bit fluky, because when he was at overtime last year, I think he shot 38% from the floor. So he needs a good coach. He needs he needs discipline around him. But yeah, I think ideally he is like a Lou Will 6-man type.
With the 9th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the Memphis Grizzlies select Zach Edey at number 9. Wasserman, what do you think of this pick?
Oh boy, number 9. I got to give this a C+.
Watch for the sign behind you. The sign's gonna fall again.
I got to wear a helmet to the next for the next couple picks. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, I think Edey, and I've turned around a little bit on him since earlier in the season when I wasn't sure he was draftable, and slowly he's moved up the board. Number 9, with some of the younger guys on the board, is a stretch. I guess if you're Memphis, you're thinking about winning right away, particularly after that down year last year. Is he going to be able to play defense in the last 10 minutes of a playoff game? He did improve his conditioning. Yeah, he's going to get you easy baskets, offensive rebounds, and he's going to be a defensive presence just by standing there. But yeah, I just think with other guys on the board, there's just higher upside options. And yeah, I'm still trying to process Zach Edey going number 9. That's just not something I saw in the cards, particularly not a couple weeks ago. I know as we got closer to this draft, we're hearing more about him rising into the lottery. But yeah, I just can't get behind this pick this early.
Accolade, National College Player of the Year. That seems to be the thing that, if we look historically, those guys have worked out in the sense Zach Edey doesn't seem like coming into this draft he fits that same mold as some of those guys who have that accolade to their name.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Zach Edey fan, especially on a personal. What he did for the college game these last 2 years, getting Purdue back to the Final Four, getting Purdue to the national championship game, dealing with the criticism and the hate and the controversy over the officiating. I think the world of him. I think this is a terrible pick. I was going with that at number 9. I mean, and especially, the idea that he could ever share the court with John Morant, who it might be the fastest player in the whole league with the ball in his hands. And Zach Edey's not going to be able to keep up with that. Zach Edey is, I could see him in the pick and roll game, so maybe that's part of the play there. But basically, for him to be effective, he's going to play this. Look, he is what he is. You got to park him near the basket. You got to get him to post up. You got to throw him the ball, and then you got to let him try to either score or get fouled. And needless to say, the size and the physicality and the athleticism of the bigs that he's going to be going up against in the NBA are exponential compared to what he faced in college. And then on the defensive end, I mean, he's going to be very hard to hide because once you move him a few feet away from the basket, he's just a sitting duck. He doesn't move his feet well. He does not recover. He's not a weak side shot blocker at all. He's very good as a primary shot blocker. So not only going ninth in the draft, which is, I don't know a single mock, Watch, I mean, you track all this stuff. I don't know a single mock that had Zach Edey going in the top 10, much less a team like Memphis that has the fastest point guard in the NBA. This is a terrible pick.
First off, I thought I was being, optimistic. I put him at 13 to the Kings, and I really had trouble even doing that to put him that high. I'm just listening to people telling me he's going in the lottery. And Seth, to your point, the fastest point guard in the league, a fast team. The craziest stat, I think, of the whole draft process is that Zach Edey did not make one basket in transition the entire season. And he played a lot of games and a lot of minutes. It seemed like he'd get one by accident just by being in good position. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of contrasting styles there. And, yeah, I'm with you. This is a shocking pick.
So, Wasserman, what's his best NBA comp? Because I'm looking at the Utah Jazz. I'm like, okay, Walker Kessler, maybe a player like that. Like, who is he like currently in the NBA?
Yeah, Kessler moved a lot differently. I mean, there is obviously no 7'4", 300-pounder in the NBA, except for Boban. But I think a bigger Jonas Valanciunas.
With the 10th pick, the Utah Jazz are taking Cody Williams, the younger brother of Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder, their lottery pick from 2022. Wasserman, what say you?
This is a B-plus pick. I mean, I like Cody Williams. I don't love Cody Williams, but again, we're at number 10 here in a draft that's lacking star power. And I think that Utah could use, an athletic wing. I don't even know how athletic Cody Williams is, but he's kind of a long, rangy wing. He's going to be an off-ball guy. I compare him to Jaden McDaniels. I think he's somebody who can, if the 40% three-point shooting does translate, it was on very low volume. And coming in, he wasn't really known for a shooter. I was surprised that he was that efficient this year at Colorado. But I bet you if you expanded the season out to 50 games, that number would drop below 40%. But he plays the right way. He gets you buckets within an offense. He's never going to, he could have a bad game and not hurt you. That's kind of one of the reasons I like him. He could really play off everybody else and just pick his spots, to slash, to cut, to attack when he's got space downhill. He's got very good defensive tools. I hear great things about him off the floor. Of course, his brother is a stud, and so maybe Cody has the blueprint on how to keep developing and evolving your game. So I like the pick. I don't see a star here, but I also don't see many stars left on the board.
Seth, when I look into Cody Williams to see, okay, the injuries, that might be a reason he didn't put up the stats we wanted to see this season. What do you think about that and how he played in his freshman year?
So Cody Williams coming out of high school, guys, from the state of Arizona, he was ranked 5th nationally in his class. He went to Colorado, which was a borderline bubble team. He averaged 12 points a game, 41.5 three-point shooting, pretty good. Only 1.6 assists, 3 rebounds. So certainly did not play up to his billing coming out of high school. Played with an outstanding point guard in KJ Simpson, and they had some other good pieces around him. He was really banged up all year, and I did get the sense during the season, guys, and that was confirmed in terms of the postseason intel, that he was playing in pain basically all year. He had a foot issue, one of those things, do you shut him down? The kid, to his credit, really, really wanted to play. A lot of players in that situation will shut it down. During the times when he was healthy, which was right about, I want to say, like early to mid-January, that middle stretch of the season when he finally got in the groove, he showed you glimpses where you're like, okay, there's the number 5 freshman in the country. He's going to get ready to take off, and it just never happened. So, if I'm an NBA scout and you're just looking for that daylight, you're looking for glimpses, it is amazing to me looking at this board. We've got 10 players picked, and not one of them is Dalton Connect. I'm telling you, this is for me the headline of the draft. And now they've just made him mad. Yeah, he's had to prove people wrong his whole life. Didn't get a single D1 offer coming out of high school because of his academic situation primarily, and yet somebody like Cody Williams, who didn't have nearly the season, Rob Dillingham, who didn't have nearly the season, even Stephon Castle didn't have nearly the season that Dalton Knecht did. So again, you're an NBA scout. You're looking for daylight. You're looking for glimpses. You're trying to project to the future. I remember it's an imperfect analogy, but Michael Porter Jr. Coming out of Missouri, he had back issues, and to me, that's the biggest red flag of all: back and feet for bigger players. And I was not a big Michael Porter guy because of that reason. Cody Williams gives me the same questions, enough glimpses to go this high in the draft.
The Chicago Bulls with the 11th pick in the draft, they take Matas Buzelis from the G League Ignite. And Wasserman, you had him as high as 5th in your mock draft. He's also a native of the suburbs in Chicago.
Yeah, I'll give this a B+. I mean, I didn't expect him to be on the board here. I struggle with Matas because the difference between his highlights and his lowlights is drastic. His highlights, you see a guy who looks like a Franz Wagner type. Everybody loves that archetype, the big wing, who could handle a little bit, who could shoot threes, who could play above the rim, who could run some pick and roll for you. The lowlights showed a guy who really struggled from outside. He couldn't turn the ball over in the half court. His handle isn't the tightest when he's pressured. So there's a lot of guesswork for me in terms of how good he's going to be in 3 years from now. But there's definitely, again, it's the potential is there for him to be a very valuable player. And I think if you're Chicago, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, right? You got to take some swings here. And I think Buzelis is a swing worth taking at number 11. I know Seth is going to probably give this an F because Dalton Knecht is still on the board. But I guess the thinking here is that Knecht, just doesn't, even though he's NBA ready, he doesn't move the needle enough at 23 years old. And you question how much better he's going to get. In Chicago, they got to find something exciting for this group, particularly if they're going to start to rebuild. If they ever choose to just accept it, swallow the pill, and make it happen.
Well, to the point that you make, Wasserman, right? You look at the Chicago Bulls situation. They traded away Alex Caruso. You think DeMar DeRozan's lost in free agency. Lonzo Ball hasn't played in over 2 years. Picked up this $21 million player option and on his contract, right? So they look to be in full rebuild mode. And Seth, the one thing that Matas Buzelis said about Zachary Charchet, for instance, he's like, oh, he doesn't want to see me. Like, this kid's got that edge, a little bit of flair to him. He missed the first 3 months of the G League Ignite season, but did hit the game winner in the Rising Stars game. I think if you're looking for a guy that at least talks the talk and you're the Chicago Bulls, he does that, although the stats do seem a bit pedestrian when you look at them, Seth.
Yeah, again, 26% three-point shooter for the Ignite. So, and again, his name is Matas Buzelis. He played for the Lithuanian national team. His parents are Lithuanian, but he grew up in Chicago. He's an American kid and played at Brewster Academy. So he's got a good pedigree. He was a McDonald's All-American. Not a lot of length, not a lot of wingspan. 26% three-point shooter, 70% free throw shooter. So that indicates that he's got probably a pretty good stroke, but maybe not a huge upside there. Absolute demon in the open floor now. When you see him get out of the open floor with the ball in his hands, I could see him running with, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, real athletic characters getting up and down. So we'll see. My guy Knecht is still out there. I'm gonna start throwing things in this room if he doesn't get picked here soon, because the idea that all these players are more prepared than Dalton Knecht to help your team win basketball games right now, it's just factually untrue.
When I see talented shot creator and ball handler for his size, Wasserman, I put the stats over here, right? When I watched Buzelis play, the couple of times I've seen him play, those are the things I did see, right? Like, you put all the best players on the floor and it's like, oh, who's the lanky kid with the ball in his hands that feels confident with it? And I'm like, man, he only shot 44% from the field. I wanted to see more of him. But for the Bulls, they're going to need someone to create shots, right? They're going to need someone they can give the ball to. And he feels like a guy that they can do that with.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that. I'm not sold that he is going to be that guy who makes everybody better. I mean, I think he's more of a scorer than a playmaker. And this kind of speaks to what I said. Like, if you look at the highlights, you watch a couple games and you see what he can do, you understand why he's been so, highly touted in the recruiting rankings, and why there's talk of him going top 5 earlier in this draft. I think the best way to describe it to me is he looks the part. I'm not sure he is the part, but yeah, he can do all these things. Let's see how he develops over the couple of years and kind of sharpens each one of the wide range of skills that he's flashed. Just not he hasn't flashed them on a regular basis. Like shooting, by the way, he was a 40% 3-point shooter at Sunrise, and this year 24%. I mean, which number do I believe here? So, he's one of the tougher evaluations in my opinion that I've had.
You believe the G League number because he's playing against guys who are this close to the NBA, and that's I think that's the number you look at there. Here's a question for you guys. We're 11 picks in, and we have more than a third of the way through the first round. Who do you have as the biggest winner so far when you look at all the picks? Seth, let's go to you first on this, and then Wasserman, I want to hear what you have to say. The biggest winner so far, 11 picks in.
I'll go with my Wizards. I like Alex Sarr. I think he's a high impact from day one player with tons of upside. I think you're getting the best of both worlds. Someone who is good right now, but he's also young with a bright future.
I mean, listen, I had Ron Holland really, really high on my board, and so Detroit got him, so that's an easy answer for me. But because people don't agree with me on Holland, and we all see a lot of different things in him, I think the other obvious one is Portland getting Donovan Clingan at number 7. I'm guessing they went into this draft not thinking that he was going to be an option or that he was somebody they would have to move up for. So I'll give the answer to Portland as a big winner.
All right, up next on the board, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, you're probably wondering, how does a team that finished with the best record out west draft 12th here? Here we go. Timberwolves trade a 2031 unprotected first-round pick, a top 1 protected 2031 swap to San Antonio for Rod Dillingham. Minnesota still holds 27 and 37 tonight, so they'll pick at the end of the first round. Wasserman, what do you make of the fact that Minnesota is able to keep their first-round pick this year and add Rob Dillingham with the 8th pick to what they have already as a team?
Hold on, I'm still wrapping my mind around that you could trade a 2031 pick. My son is 4 years old. He's going to have his bar mitzvah in 2031. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm still trying to remember what this was. So San Antonio gives that pick up, right? That's what we discussed. So, I mean, they really wanted to get out of that spot. It sounds like that's really what this comes down to.
Well, so what's really interesting is we look at these picks and we go, oh, those are years down the road. They're kicking the can down the road. This 12th pick that the Oklahoma City Thunder have, from being still having the best record out west, right? And being a team that's probably going to compete for a title next year. That's from their 2019 Russell Westbrook trade. So this is what we have coming up when you look at sometimes these do pay off in the long run. Seth, what do you think of Rob Dillingham with the Minnesota Timberwolves? Essentially, they snatched the 8th pick in the draft and just give up some future draft rights.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, we just had this huge story yesterday with the Knicks really mortgaging their future for Mikal Bridges, who I think is a pretty nice player. But that's a lot. That's a lot to give up. I mean, when you look at what the Celtics gave up for Drew Holiday and Derek White and some of the guys that they picked up, you're not mortgaging your entire future. So the fact that you're giving up not that much for the number 8 pick in the draft, even though, like I said, I'm not a big Dillingham guy, I think it's a cool spot for him. I really do, because it's a winning team. I think he's going to have fun. It's a very exciting team, Minnesota, obviously. Anthony Edwards, we see what he's doing and everybody around him. And so, I think it's very impressive that they were able to get the number 8 pick, giving up so little given the season that they had, how young they are as a franchise. He'll be able to come off the bench and do the things that he does well. They're not going to ask him to do things that he doesn't do well. And to the point that he becomes a defensive liability, no problem. You can put him back on the bench and bring back in the starters, and then away we go. So good for the team and good for Dillingham for this combination.
The pick is in. The Thunder select Nikola Topic at number 12. Topic, a guard, again, coming off of knee surgery, playing overseas. What do you make of this pick, Wasserman, at 12?
I'll give this. I mean, this is a boring grade, but a B plus. I mean, there's so much. There's a little bit of uncertainty again with Topic, um, but what's interesting is that he's kind of similar to Josh Giddey. I mean, these are guys who are big point guards who don't shoot. And I know they just traded Giddey to kind of add another Giddey archetype as a big point guard who is a playmaker, but you can't really play him off the ball. So maybe they part of the reason they traded Giddey is because they knew they can get Topic in this draft. But if we're evaluating Topic in a vacuum, yeah, he's very good at getting to spots in the half court. Despite he doesn't have like blow by explosiveness, he's pretty creative, and he's creative around the basket, efficient, despite the athleticism. And I always think passing translates. When I see these guys who have vision and instincts and rack up assists, and as long as you have the tools to continue executing those passes, I think they're going to translate. So I see him as a very effective setup man. The question is he going to improve his shot? Can he create for himself? He probably doesn't need to with the Oklahoma City team. He's just going to come in and again try to make the game easier for everybody else. But yeah, I'm sure this is going to have to become a conversation because he's very similar to Giddey in what he does well and what he doesn't do well.
I have a prediction that Dalton Connect is coming off the board soon because, Seth, I thought this is where he was going to go, but I do understand the concept of the salary cap and what the Thunder are going to have to deal with in the not-so-distant future. And by bringing in Topic, you don't have to pay Giddey, so you kind of fill that same spot, and hopefully you get a guy that can produce at the same level. But Dalton Connect, I thought, would have been a great fit for the Thunder here, and I'm looking up and I go, okay, Seth, I think your time is coming, my friend.
Well, again, you see our graphic there, Topic, 6'6" height, 6'5.5" wingspan. That tells you that he's not going to add a lot on the defensive end. He's a pass-first point guard and a non-shooter, and so he's not going to add much on that end. Now, we got SGA and Chet Holmgren. These are guys who are going to have the ball in their hands a lot, who are going to score the ball a lot, and so they don't necessarily need a setup guy. And so there's a reason why they traded Josh Giddey, and you bring in a guy like Caruso, who's a defensive guy. So, we'll see. We'll see. I don't necessarily see the fit. The guy shot 30% from three-point range. The talent is there. I'm not personally concerned about the injury. These guys are a lot younger than the three of us. They heal well. It's not anything that he can't recover from. And, frankly, at his age, he shouldn't be somebody that they are expecting to contribute right away. I think he'll spend plenty of time in the G League because that's really what he needs is repetitions, minutes on the floor, running a team, working on his outside shot, and then we'll take it from there. So not a terrible pick, but nothing that would excite me if I were a Thunder fan. I don't think he's going to spend – I think he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League developing down there and getting physically and mentally ready to play in the NBA.
Yeah, 18 years old, started playing pro at 16. And I think the biggest key I see there, Wasserman, gets to his spots and knows how to create MVP, FIBA U18 European Championship. You start to see accolades like that, and you're like, okay, this guy, as Seth is saying, in a few years could really be a difference maker and a shot creator for others.
Yeah, getting to spots, creating, that's going to be what makes him money in this league. Putting pressure on the rim, he's fast in transition. A lot is just going to come down to his shot and whether he's going to get exposed defensively. But you draft him at number 12 because you think that he can create a lot of offense for you.
We're starting to get to the part of the draft, and not necessarily the Washington Wizards who traded back into the 14th spot, right? But where teams were either close to being good to see, like the Kings only lost 2 more games this year than they had the previous year. You look at it, they got Monk, Fox, Sabonis, Kevin Huerter. They really do have a great group. So, Seth, of the guys on the board, who do you think could be a good fit for the Sacramento Kings?
Well, I know I'm a broken record, obviously, but, my guy Connect at a certain point, I think he's a good fit anywhere. Bub Carrington, the freshman at Pittsburgh, is somebody who really shot up all these draft boards here since the end of the season. Jared McCain, by the way, from Duke, still on the board, as pure a shooter as you'll find in the draft. So I think we're actually getting to the part of the draft that really becomes interesting, because I think there's a lot of value. We talked about how there's not a lot of value at the top, but in looking at the body of this class, I really felt like the middle to the late first round is where you're going to get the most valuable for those shot selections. So it depends on what Sacramento wants. But again, Sacramento is a very fast-paced, up-and-down team. And Terrence Shannon, maybe a little bit of sleeper, maybe a little bit high for him to go, by the way. But, as good of a downhill driver, scorer as you're going to find in this draft.
Wasserman, looking at who's left on the board at 13 for the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, their biggest strength is at center and at the guard position. So the players on the board, who you think would be a great fit?
I love Devin Carter. I mean, I think that he's going to bring a level of toughness that you can't teach. Little things like 9 boards a game at 6'2". I mean, he blocked 70 shots, I think, in his career at 6'2". Those type of things I think are good for Sacramento, and I like him as a kind of I think he's a good fit actually with De'Aaron Fox at the 2 spot. So he would be my pick. I think I have him. He's my best available player. I really love Jared McCain. I'm a big McCain guy.
And you were right on, my friend. Sacramento's going to select Devin Carter with the 13th pick. You were just waxing poetically about him as the potential best prospect available for them in this spot, Wasserman.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just try not to repeat myself too much from 30 seconds ago, but he is, listen, he caught my attention. I started writing about him early in his sophomore year, and it had nothing to do with anything he did offensively. I watched a couple of Providence games, and I just watched the guys he was guarding look miserable. I mean, he's chasing them around. They couldn't escape 2 inches from him. He was blocking their shots. This is an A for me. I mean, I my best player available, and I like what he does for this particular team. So his defensive intensity, his peskiness, the anticipation. He's got a 6'7" wingspan, which helps compensate for that lack of size. But then he's in this conversation right now at 13 overall in the lottery because of the strides he made offensively. I mean, he made over 2 threes a game this year. He was one of the more efficient pick and roll players in this draft. He's just a very crafty guy. He's obviously loaded with confidence. He shoots it from 30 feet out. And I think he had 25 dunks this year. He stole the show during athletic testing, which I didn't really see coming. I mean, he had the highest, tied for the highest max vertical. He set the record, the NBA combine records for fastest sprint time, and he finished 3rd in the agility drill. So you throw in the athleticism, the positional length at 6'7", the guaranteed defense that's going to translate, in my opinion, the improving offense, and just his toughness in general. I love the pick.
Seth, I look at him and you go, okay, the pedigree is there. A son of 13-year NBA veteran Anthony Carter, right? You kind of look at his age, 22 years old. The Sacramento Kings, they're looking for guys who can come in and contribute right away. It reminds me of like when the Miami Heat drafted Jaime Jaquez last year. Like, okay, we know who we are as a team. We don't need like prospects who we don't know what they are. Feels like you know exactly what he is coming in if you're the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, and just watching him right now, hug his dad, it's just weird for me. Guys I covered in college, now hugging their sons as they're getting drafted into the NBA. I love this pick. I love this kid. I love this player. I love this fit. Sacramento's got all these incredibly talented wings. An elite electric point guard in De'Aaron Fox. Lots of guys who can score. Keegan Murray's a high-level scorer. Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, all these guys. And now you're throwing an absolute dog into this locker room where he just wants to find the best player on the other team and, as Was just said, make him miserable. And the reason why his offensive game came along was out of necessity because Providence's best player and a guy who could have been Big East Player of the Year, and by the way, I thought that Devin Carter could have been Big East Player of the Year, but Bryce Hopkins got hurt in late December and was gone for the season. And Providence was already kind of bubble-ish team. They ended up not making the tournament. They were one of the first teams left out of the tournament. But Devin Carter was the only reason they were even in that conversation. So his offense came along as a matter of necessity. I would argue he was the best two-way perimeter player in all of college basketball. And this might be my favorite pick so far of the night, to be honest, because in terms of who this young man is, how he plays, his character, the team he's going to, the fit on this roster, chef's kiss to the Kings. I love my guy Connect, but in this situation, Devin Carter is better for the Kings.
If the Washington Wizards, your Washington Wizards, who already took Alex Sarr second, then traded Denny Avdia to get Malcolm Brogdon and the 14th pick in this draft. If they end up drafting Dalton Connect in a few minutes here at 14, I just don't know if we're going to have Seth Davis for the rest of this draft. I mean, it just feels like so many things are brewing right here as we wait for this 14th pick to come in. But for the Washington Wizards to kind of set off those fireworks before the draft even started, what do you make of them trading away Denny Avdia, who's shown glimpses that he can be a really good player on a better team, the things that he brings to the table, trading him away to get this pick and to bring in Malcolm Brogdon?
Yeah, why don't we give that one to Seth? Because as a Wizards fan, I'm sure he's watching more than I am.
Yes, Seth.
Yeah, well, Adil is a great player. He's a great piece. He's not going to make or break your franchise. I don't think I would bet if you asked the Wizards when they made that pick that they're going to get made that trade that they're going to get the 14th pick, that Dalton Connect would still be on the board. I think that they would say he is not. So to me, this should really be an obvious choice. Taking Bob Carrington. No one's listening to me tonight. This is amazing. Watch, am I overstating it? Tell me the truth. They're going to take Carrington at 14. So Connect is still available at 15. Is this a shock?
It's a shock he's still on the board. I mean, I don't know I haven't heard anyone that I've spoken to that thinks Connect was going to slip out of the lottery. If anything, I was hearing he was going to go earlier than people expected. But Bob Carrington to Washington, I give this a C+. I get it. I get that he's super young, and this is a rebuilding team. So he has the runway to kind of make mistakes, and they can be patient with him. But I don't see the upside that a lot of people saw. I get that he's let's talk about the positives, because I don't want to kill him. He hit 100 pull-ups this year. I mean, he is a shot maker. He's a good pick and roll passer. He's not a great athlete. He barely gets to the rim. He doesn't get to the free throw line. This is kind of a nerdy analytical thing to say, but he had a 1.0% steal percentage. In all the years, I can't remember a first round guard. I think I did the research. I couldn't remember a first round guard, at least one that had any success with the steal percentage that low. And I think it's not indicative of defense, but more of quickness. And at that position, you need quickness. So I think it's a bit of a reach. I know a lot of people who really caught on to Bob are really, he moved up the board during this pre-draft process, mostly because of his positional size, his shot making, the idea that he can make these, pick and roll reads. But I have questions about his ability to create separation, put pressure on the rim. And then even though he was a shot maker, he didn't really shoot a high percentage from three. So I think there's a little bit of bust potential with him. But again, he's really young. And I get why teams would want to take a gamble here, particularly Washington, who, of course, is starting from scratch here.
Well, 18 years old, right? And Seth, to that point, he's the first ACC player to have a triple-double in his first game since Dennis Scott back in 1987, right? Like, that's a plus you see next to his name. And the fact that he's a kid from Baltimore, right? For the Washington Wizards trying to sell their fan base. Is that overstepping a bit, trying to bring some positives to this pick for the Washington Wizards at 14?
Look, I was not in these private workouts that he had since the end of the college season. He did not play in the open scrimmages at the Combine in Chicago. There was no buzz about Bob Carrington going into the Combine in Chicago that I was able to pick up on, so I was quite surprised to see him move up the boards. You're talking about a guy who played as a freshman starter on a team that did not make the NCAA tournament, barely missed out, but did not make the NCAA tournament, averaged 14 points a game, shot 32% from three at 6'4". So maybe all these teams are seeing something that I'm missing. I know what I did see from Dalton Connect, and it was a lot better than this. So maybe he'll turn out to be that. Obviously, the Wizards are in a major sort of tank flush rebuild type of mode here, and we'll see what moves they make off of this. I don't think anybody in that building expects Bob Carrington to come in his rookie year and have a major impact on the team.
Wait. How did this happen? We're on this show. We're all looking at each other in our eyes. And Seth Davis tweets this out. All these teams are going to seriously regret not taking Dalton Connect. Pure malpractice. Now they made him mad. So, Seth, is someone running your social media account, or do you have like hidden fingers over there? What's going on?
It's called adult onset ADD is how it's going here. I got a lot going on here, keeping track of what's. Hey man, it's the draft. You can't just be in one place at one time. Come on. But the bigger question is, how is Dalton Connect still available in this draft? What am I missing? What am I missing? Somebody please. This is not my. This is my first time watching basketball?
I'm looking at this board right now. He's not making it past these 4 teams.
Give me a break.
First up, I would think Miami. I mean, Miami seems like a team who would take him just based on history. They took a senior last year in Jaquez. They're in win now mode. If they don't take him at 15, then maybe we find out that something's going on with Dalton Connect. But,
yeah, that was actually one of that was maybe, but I didn't. I mean, nobody picked up on that there was some type of red flag with him physically. Something popped up in one of his physicals. I guarantee you, nothing popped up in terms of interviews and the due diligence on his character and his background and his work ethic and all that, because all that was off the charts. So I called it malpractice, and that's exactly what it is.
All right, we're going to move past
maybe
Dalton.
It was just meant to be that he falls to Miami because that's
what Miami does.
Place for him.
And by the way, I wouldn't recommend it because we have better things to do. Go back and look at my Twitter feed from the draft last year. I was saying the same thing about Jaquez. Like, you people are nuts. Like, you're overthinking because somebody's 22, 23 years old that they're a finished product. At least they're a known quantity, and they're good basketball players who continue to get better once they're in the league. You give them a full summer, a full training camp, where this is all that they do, especially someone like Jaquez, someone like Connect. We know what their work ethic is like. So, yeah, I hope the Heat do get him because the Heat, of course, have the best culture, not only in the NBA, but one of the best cultures you'll find in all of sports. I think he'd be a great fit there.
Yeah, and Heat culture just keeps nailing it in the draft in the sense that the guys they want are sitting there for the taking every single year. Jaime Jaquez last year. Maybe it'll be Dalton Connect this year. Or let's take a look at some of the other prospects that you have that are still on the board. Could be sleeper, Seth. We're about halfway through the first round of this 2024 NBA draft. Who are some other guys that you think at this point may have fallen or could be great sleeper picks for these teams that are looking to be contending teams next year?
Well, these sleepers that I have here are a little bit more towards the second round. But, let's talk about Kevin McCullough because, kind of similar to me with a guy like Dalton Connect. To me, and I thought about this with Jalen Brunson. I didn't know Jalen Brunson would be this good with the Knicks. I said it's about Draymond Green. Guys who are dominant at the college level usually find a way to play in the NBA. So here's your number 15 pick.
Miami is expected to select Jared McCain out of Duke. We know him as a 30-point scorer in the NCAA tournament. What do you make of this pick at 15 for the Miami Heat, Wasserman?
I give it an A. I love McCain. I love him. I love his game. I love his passion and personality. Listen, he's going to come in and he's going to give you shot making right away. He was a shot maker in high school. He carried over to college. I have no questions about his shooting. He's one of the best in the draft. One of the reasons why I really pushed him up my board throughout the season is because I didn't think he would be this good inside the arc with his pick and roll command and feel and changing pace. He can shoot off the dribble. He's got a very good floater. I thought he would struggle badly around the basket. I remember in high school thinking, like, there's no way this guy's going to finish at the next level, and he made adjustments. I love guys who struggle at something and then make adjustments, and McCain did that. I love that fact that he's so adaptable. I mean, you could run him in ball screens, put him off the ball. There's no personal agenda with him. He's a team guy. I think people are going to really like him. Yeah, man, I just think he's a very well-rounded guard. I know he's not the biggest. I know he's not the most athletic, but he reminds me of an Emmanuel Quickly type, who you can, don't give him a position, just put him in at guard. He'll be on the ball, he'll be off the ball. He's going to make shots. He's going to compensate for the lack of explosion with his touch, with his craftiness. I think he's going to show that he's got some point guard vision in him off the live dribble, and so I'm a fan of this.
So Wasserman, apparently there was a mistake. Shams Charania is reporting that Miami is selecting Khalil Ware at 15 for the Miami Heat. So what do you make of that selection?
Okay, let me rewind here and get the last 30 seconds of my life back and your life back. Khalil Ware, I like Ware more than most people. He's had this narrative since high school that he doesn't play hard. I think it's more about he's not super physical, and that hurts him. But in terms of just pure talent, he's got a case to be the most talented guy on the board at 7 foot, who plays high above the rim. And skill-wise, I mean, he shot 40% from three this year. He hits turnarounds around the post. The footwork is there. He's a very skilled 7-footer who can protect the basket and finish high above it. I guess I'm going to give this pick a B plus. I like McCain better. So I mean, I'm thinking McCain was going there. I'm kind of downgrading Khalil Ware here a little bit. Yeah, at this point in the draft, I think the potential reward is worth the risk. But yeah, he did struggle against quality opponents, like when he played Edey and he played Klingon. I'm trying to think of some of the other NBA caliber bigs he played. He did struggle. So that's something to watch for. But from a pure talent perspective, he's definitely worthy of a 15 pick. And maybe if you get the right coaching staff around him, you make basketball a career where he has to live in the weight room. He has to be there every single day. Yeah, I can get behind this pick.
Wasserman makes a great point, Seth. And when you say, okay, what are things that a certain player needs to work on? He needs the right place. Well, the Miami Heat have shown us that they're the right place. They've also kind of alluded that they guys next to Bios on the draft Nikola Jovic a few years earlier, and now Khalil Ware. What do you think of Khalil Ware coming into the NBA as the 15th pick in the draft here?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Was said. I mean, he's a frustrating player. Started off at Oregon, was a very highly rated recruit coming out of high school, came to Indiana, really showed you great flashes. I mean, he had some games where he was absolutely dominant and, in fact, looked like a lottery pick, and he's essentially what he is. But there were certainly times where he disappeared. He's just not in good enough shape. He's not strong enough. His conditioning isn't good enough. I even heard in some of his workouts he would just get super winded. And so you have this narrative of a guy not playing hard. I know these NBA teams are digging like really deep. I've never heard a bad thing about Khalil Ware's character. I just think he's just not physically developed, and again, he's a sophomore in college, so we have to remember how young these kids are. If the light does go on with him and he understands, look, man, all you got to do is just ramp up something that is very much in your control, which is your work ethic and your ability to get strong and your ability to get in good physical condition, and you are going to make a lot of money because this kid is super talented. Sometimes kids don't work hard because there is some type of character, red flag, judgment question, maturity, whatever. I have never heard that. It may be true in some instances, some circles, but that certainly wasn't the buzz out of Indiana. The Indiana coaches liked him. They enjoyed coaching him. They said good things about his personality. He'll get strong, got to get older, but the physical talent is there. Like but I think guys who shoot the basketball can pretty much fit in anywhere. I think where you mentioned about giving them another big body. They had Kevin Love coming off the bench, Bam Adebayo. Guys shuffling in and out of the lineup as happens on every NBA team. I think a team like Miami and Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, I would trust them to do the due diligence they needed to do to be like, look, if this kid is going to come in and just work hard and do everything that we say, then he can be a good contributor for us both this season and down the road.
All right, we took a look a few picks ago. Now we are halfway through the first round. Prize for so far of the first 15 picks. Seth, why don't you go first here?
Oh, it's got to be Zach Edey. I mean, I just saw somebody, one of the other draft covers on Twitter calling it the worst draft pick in NBA history. Wow. I think the Portland Trailblazers might have something to say about that, passing on a certain guard from North Carolina. But it's just he's just getting picked way too high for a guy who just doesn't bring a lot of value, and then just stylistically about as bad a fit as you can imagine.
Yeah, biggest surprise for me is Tijan Salan going six. Tijan Salan going six before Donovan Clingham is hard for me to wrap my mind around. I just, particularly with Charlotte that needed toughness and needed a sure thing. Tijan Salan is like such a wild card here, and man, that one shocked me. And I mean, if nobody has been listening to Seth Davis for the last hour, Dalton Connect is still on the board. That is him not getting picked is at this point equally as surprising as Edey at 9 and Tijan Salan at 6 over Clingan.
So that's a great point that you make about Dalton Connect. And I think there's an elephant in this room that now that we're at 16, 17, 18, we need to address. And Wasserman, you and I talked about this on the mock draft show yesterday a bit. So Seth, I kind of want to hear from you about Isaiah Collier. Here was a guy that came in as McDonald's All-American Game MVP, so heralded going into USC, was on a lot of mock drafts as like the #1 pick. And here we are, 16 picks in. We haven't mentioned him yet. What happened with him his freshman year at USC where he's dropped so far?
Well, the main thing that happened is that he got hurt and missed 6 games midway through the year. And then he played on a team that had some other injuries. Of course, Bronny James had the heart issue, and there were other injury issues going on with USC. It was not a particularly good team, kind of felt a little bit dysfunctional, was already kind of a rebuilding type of season. And then he just wasn't good enough. I mean, he just couldn't shoot the ball all that well. So, you look at his percentages, it was 34%. But if you watch him shoot, it didn't feel like that. That said, he is a physical specimen, and there are very real reasons why he was the #1 rated high school senior in the country and projected to go that high in the draft. So this might be, folks overthinking it. Again, we've seen some non-shooters going early. We talked about Buzelis. We talked about Ron Holland, obviously. Good athletes who don't shoot the ball well, but can do other things. I think Isaiah Collier is definitely one of those. I would expect him to hear his name called at some point tonight. So being a first-round NBA draft pick is nothing to be disappointed in. But certainly, if you look at where he was projected to go a year ago, if I told you at the start of the college basketball season that we'd get through the first half of the first round of the NBA draft and Isaiah Collier would not be picked, I think a lot of people would have taken that action.
Yeah. By the way, it's funny how the narrative shifted. In the beginning of the season, I thought he was overrated when he was in the top 3. Now I think he's undervalued. I think people are putting a little too much stock into the negatives and not enough stock into what he really can do well. I think he's also the type of guy, Collier, who's going to need the right fit, and maybe he's better off, as a 6-man spark type of guy instead of somebody who will run offense for 30 minutes because when you're a bad decision maker and you're a bad shooter, it's hard to trust you for 35 minutes a game with the ball. But if you can just say, hey, Isaiah, come off the bench, put pressure on the rim, play fast, bring your physicality in, you can add a different element to our rotation.
And the Philadelphia 76ers get a player that they most certainly could use. Jared McCain out of Duke at pick number 16, Wasserman.
Yeah, this is an A. Can we just go back and get whatever I said 10 minutes ago? I'll do it again. And I guess I got this pick right on the mock draft. I really like the fit here with Philly and with Tyrese Maxey. Again, 2 interchangeable guys. But, yeah, I mean, he is a shooter, shot maker. He could every type of jumper in the book. And I put a lot of stock into these undersized guards into their floaters. I think it's such an important shot. He's got some of the best touch in this draft, and I think we're going to see a lot more, pick and roll stuff, than maybe he was given credit for playing at Duke, where they had Proctor and they had Roach, and so of course the offense is going to run through Joel and Maxey, but I think there's more offensive upside than he gets credit for, which I think the lack of size and athleticism and the lower assist total at Duke overshadows some of his creation ability. So he's so crafty, and again, I love his personality. I know the TikTok stuff might not be for everyone, but I'm a fan of him as a person. I think he kind of has this positive energy that's good for the locker room, And then when he gets on the floor, he's super tough. It's not like he's playful on the floor. He's a killer on the floor. So I'm a big fan of him as a person. I really like his game.
Seth, you look at the 76ers situation, right? They have, an MVP in Joel Embiid, but they have a ton of cap space in which you think they're going to get a max player to go alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid and another max player. It seems like he's going into a great situation where they're going to need his skill set, and he's going to get opportunities to produce.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was Duke's best player. He was Duke's toughest player. He was Duke's most consistent player. When Duke was playing in their toughest games, in their most critical situations, he was the player who came through the most. He reminds me a little bit of Devin Booker when he was coming out of Kentucky. He's one of those players that, when he pulls up in rhythm, in control, and getting some space, you just expect the ball to go in. And to Wass's point, the TikTok thing and his whole vibe, he's really into sort of mindfulness and meditation and being mentally prepared and taking all the steps. Every level that he's ever played at, there were doubts about whether he was physically able to compete. He's not small, but he's not big. Certainly for a two guard, he's not a one. He's definitely a two, but he's a pure two. He's got a pure stroke, super crafty, plays with a great spirit about him. And he's just going to keep getting better and better because he's going to, take care of himself, not only getting stronger, but getting his rest and doing all the things that he needs to be able to do to recover, to get ready. And he's going, I think he's the type of player, I've said this about a couple of guys tonight, who will be able to play with other good players. So you look at a Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, obviously Joel Embiid has to get the ball, and Joel Embiid can step away from the basket. Jared McCain is a really, really good catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. Shot over 41% overall from the arc as a freshman in the ACC, as a starter on a top 10 team. So I think he's NBA ready with a lot of upside, great personality, and he can really, really, really shoot the basketball. Those guys tend to stick around for a while.
I know we're going to see a Joel Embiid, Jared McCain TikTok video coming in like just a couple of weeks from now. But Wasserman, I look at him and I go, a lot of these players, we don't know what they are. And with him, I think we know exactly who he is and exactly how he fits on the Philadelphia 76ers. I see your A, and I almost feel like jumping the shark and saying this is an A+, the shot in the arm that franchise needs because they're trying to put a lot of new pieces together.
Yeah, I almost forgot that you can do an A+.
At 16,
yeah,
that's a value pick, yeah.
I guess whoever takes Dalton Connect next gets the first A+ of the draft. Will it be the Lakers, by the way, who are obviously trying to win right now? I've heard the Lakers really like Yves Missi from Baylor, so that we'll see what happens here. But yeah, back to McCain. He's just so adaptable and interchangeable, and he's going to fit in right away. And certainly, Philly has like nobody under contract next year, so I think that the flexibility that he gives you as somebody who could play on and off the ball and be kind of positionless is pretty important when you're trying to build a roster.
Yeah, they have guards that have kind of fluxed between the G League and the NBA, like Ricky Council IV. So, let's go to that for a second, Seth Davis, because I know you know who Ricky Council IV is. And I thought he was spectacular in the G League. And Daryl Morey sat like next to me at the G League showcase and was like, yeah, we got to get this guy playing some more. I know he's not in this draft, but when you look at Jared McCain, Ricky Council IV, like the 76ers have a lot of young talent that Traquavion Smith is another guy, right? That people may not be familiar with, but these players in the fact that they can play in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not just a matter of assembling talent. And the Celtics were obviously the best example of this, which is why they just won the championship, is it has to fit. And there's a difference between being a good player and knowing how to play with other good players. And so that's why I think it's very important as a guard, if you're not going to be a playmaker on the perimeter, if you're going to be a scorer, you've got to score in different ways. He's not going to be a powerful McCain. He's not going to be a powerful finisher at the rim, but I think he's going to be an efficient finisher at the rim. And I think he can bring back the sort of, the throwback mid-range game that seems to be illegal in some quarters. But when you're playing in space and you're playing off of other good players, and then you bring that toughness. I mean, don't let the smooth taste fool you. With this kid with the TikTok videos and the smiling and whatever, and the fingernail polish. I mean, he's got it all going. Put him in between those lines in that 94-foot rectangle, and he's going to fight you. And I think that the fans in Philly are going to really love that attitude. He's a much better defender than people give him credit for, and he's a pro. I mean, he's going to approach every aspect of the job, every aspect of his life as a professional. You're never going to have to worry about what he's doing in his spare time, where he is, what decisions he's making. He's going to be about all the right things.
All right, the pick is in, and the Lakers select Dalton Connect.
Thank
He's
you.
Off the board.
Thank you.
Seth Davis is a happy camper.
Thank you.
Wasserman at 17. Jackpot for LeBron James and Anthony Davis. What do you give this?
Let's do our first A+ of the draft, and maybe the first A+ I've given doing these grades. I mean, what a perfect guy to fall to LA, right? I mean, their window is now. They don't have time for a project, and so you get how many times are going to say this cliche? Plug and play. I mean, he's going to come in right away and knock down shots. He gets to play to his strengths. We don't have to worry about creating or pick and roll ball handling. He's going to be an immediate shot maker, but also he's tough, man. He is. He doesn't get enough credit for how tough he is, and a better athlete, I think, than he gets credit for as well. When you see him in the open floor, he could play above the rim, but he's just so polished and refined. His footwork coming off screens, he's so fundamentally sound, and something tells me that JJ Redick is going to love Dalton Connect. I mean, I couldn't think of a better guy to fall to them, and somebody I'd imagine they weren't even talking about at number 17. So everything aligned here, I think, for both parties with JJ joining the Lakers and then getting a skilled shooter who understands the game, and you can come in at 23 years old and play right away. I mean, I don't think it could have worked out better for both parties here.
Or Seth Davis. The floor is yours.
Yeah, what do they tell Dalton Connect? They're sending him down to the G League so they can bring Bronny up. That'll be an interesting conversation. I think JJ, you make a great point about JJ Redick. I mean, I think JJ Redick looks at Dalton Connect and says, that's the player that I wish that I could have been. Because JJ, of course, one of the great college shooters in history, didn't have that size, certainly didn't have that bounce. And so for him to fall to the Lakers, of course, the Lakers made all these moves last year, bringing in Taurean Prince, bringing in Gabe Vincent, re-signing Austin Reeves, of course, with the hopes of improving their three-point shooting. Didn't really happen. Obviously, LeBron is a ball-dominant guy, not super efficient when it comes to three-point range. But, Dalton Connect is a guy I think they'll probably look to, bringing him off the bench. It'll be fascinating watching him play opposite Austin Reeves. Very, very similar player. In fact, if I'm J.J. Redick than the Lakers, I'm going to tell Connect to move in with Austin Reeves. First of all, I live in L.A., Dalton. I'm sure you're watching right now as you're going to the podium. You want to crash on my couch. I got 2 kids just left for college, so we got plenty of space. We'll feed you. He's going to love living in L.A. And, look, it's when you're talking about a guy who did not get a Division I scholarship offer coming out of high school as an academic non-qualifier, could have given up on the whole basketball thing altogether at that point, and then ended up saying, no, I want to keep going. And he went to junior college, worked out well for him there, got his grades in order, went to Northern Colorado, Big Sky's leading scorer, had a sensational season at Tennessee. So the fact that he's being picked with the 18th pick in the NBA draft, I mean, that's an incredible story. And yet, because of the narrative of the night and what all of our expectations were, he now comes in with something to prove. He comes in now with a chip on his shoulder, wanting to prove to everybody who passed him over. And I think he's going to make a lot of people feel really silly because he's going to come out firing.
All right, the pick is in. The Orlando Magic at 18 select Tristan da Silva. Wasserman?
A minus. I love De Silva. He's just another one of these highly skilled, super intelligent guys who you expect to just jump into a rotation and make things happen for you without being, without needing a lot of touches. He's going to be a low maintenance, stretch the floor, pick his spots. He could play in the post. Obviously he's shot in over around 38%, I think, the last couple of years from deep. Yeah, I mean, it's a simple combination of shot making, of just high skill level and IQ. And I think that combination is another, let's go back to the word, plug and play for Orlando. So he's somebody who shot at boards. I hear such amazing things about him off the floor, how cultured he is. And yeah, it seems like hard to imagine him not being successful pro. And pretty good fit, in my opinion, coming off the bench for Orlando.
Seth, I look at the Orlando Magic. This is the lowest position they've drafted in at 18 since 2012. I mean, they've gotten guys like Paolo Banchero, Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, Jed Howard, just to name a few. And it feels like Tristan da Silva at 18 fits in with those guys.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I can't say I'm a huge Da Silva guy. Obviously, I see all the things in him that Was sees: the size, the skill, the shooting ability, the range, the ability. I keep saying it, to play with other good players, play with a really good point guard in KJ Simpson, international player, native of Germany. The thing you did hear from scouts about him is just that he's a little soft, right? He doesn't play with physicality. If you really got up in him, you could take him out of his game, and that's going to be an adjustment for him. But to your point, Orlando's a very good fit. He's not going to come in there and have to do a whole lot. He can come off the bench. He can find his spots. He can play inside a little bit. And so if Banchero wants to come out, or, Mo Wagner, he's got that outside skill as well. Kind of a plug-and-play guy. Let him find his way. Wouldn't be surprised to see him spend some time in the G League. He's just got to get stronger. He's got to get used to the physical level of play in the NBA, because certainly the scouting report on him was, if you can get physical with him, he will shy away from contact, play away from the basket. And if that was the case in the Pac-12, it's certainly going to be the case in the NBA. But very solid pick here.
Okay, so I want to address some of the comments we have coming in from the chat. Again, this is an interactive show right here on Bleacher Report. I thought this one was kind of funny. It actually was a few minutes ago. They said the Lakers should have selected Zach Edey. Right? I just thought that was hilarious, because we all thought like Zach Edey would be available in this place. And of course, he went way higher than anybody thought. But this one, it seems a little bit serious. Jack Irwin says Magic are going to waste Da Silva. And Wasserman, I disagree with that. I feel like they give their prospects opportunities to get on the floor and play.
Yeah, they do. I'm not even sure waste Da Silva. I mean, that would suggest that because Paolo and Franz are there, he's just not going to get enough playing time. I guess that's where that argument is coming. But man, depth is so important in today's league, and he's going to get his chance at some point. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked, like Seth said, if he goes down to the G League for a little bit. But we don't need like instant production right away. Just, there's going to be injuries. He's going to get opportunities to play, and everybody will need shooting at some point of his season. And I think that's one thing he's proven to us over the last few years, that, if you just look at the numbers and the eye test, this guy can make spot up jump shots and space the floor. So yeah, there might be, the first half of the season, we might not hear his name much, but I promise you at some point he's going to get on the floor and give them a surefire translatable skill that Orlando could certainly value.
If Mo Wagner can get minutes, I think Tristan da Silva is going to get minutes. I kind of like this one. It's something we haven't touched base with yet. Carlos, I'm guessing that, I can't tell if he's trolling or if he's one of these people that have, when you get into your lift, I don't know if this happens to you guys, when you get picked up anywhere, somebody starts talking to you about basketball. Is Bronny getting drafted or not? I'm confused. Seth, would you like to enlighten the people about what's going to happen here in the first round in regards to Bronny James?
Bronny James is going to be selected in the second round tomorrow night by the Los Angeles Lakers. It's the worst kept secret in this draft. On the one hand, it is a little bit of a waste of a second round pick. I mean, you can get pretty good players in the second round, including a two-time MVP now playing for the Nuggets, who was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. It's been interesting, sort of playing with the possibility of another team wanting to take Bronny James, A, just to screw with the Lakers, B, maybe you do something that says, hey, LeBron, you want to come here and play. But the problem is, if you do that, then you're making an enemy of Rich Paul. And I personally would not want to make an enemy of Rich Paul. So I don't think there's a lot of suspense. Unless Was is hearing anything differently, Bronny's getting picked tomorrow night by the Lakers.
Let's take a look at
bad business.
Yeah, let's take a look at the big board now as the Raptors are on the clock. They just re-upped Scotty Barnes in a 5-year deal that could be worth upwards of $225 million. They traded away Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby to kind of make this Scotty Barnes' group. So looking at this board, Wasserman, who do you like as a good fit for the Raptors here at 19?
Again, at 19, I'm still going with. I'm still taking best available player. I'm not worrying too much about fit for Toronto, and I like Collier with Quickly. Right, that would be the backcourt there. You got to put Collier next to a shooter and a guy who I think is a good defender. I've being a New Yorker, I've watched Quickly for a long time, last couple of years, and his 6'9" wingspan, he can defend. I don't know if he's got that reputation around the league, but I promise you he could defend. So the Quickly's shot making and defense, I think, is a good fit for Collier's lack of shooting and rim pressure and physicality. Who else we got? Going down the board, I like Jalen Tyson. I just think he's a pro scorer.
The pick is in, and the Toronto Raptors went in a different direction. Jacoby Walter at 19. Of course, Jacoby named after Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. That's his first name put together. Wasserman at 19. Do you like this for the Toronto Raptors?
Yeah, I'll give this a standard B. I don't see a lot of upside with him, with Jacoby Walter, but I do think that he has a valued archetype as a 3 and D2 guard. I personally like my guards who could handle and create and offer some level of playmaking, because if you're a guard who does not playmake, you really have a very limited margin for error as a shooter and scorer. And I just don't see him as a guy who's going to create a lot for himself. But he is a very polished shot maker, and not just spotting up, but running off screens. And he's pretty physical getting downhill. I think if there's space, he can attack you and get to the rim. He took a bunch of free throws this past season. He's got solid defensive tools. B may be a little bit harsh. I probably could have upgraded to a B+, but let's not nitpick here. He's this deep into the draft, I don't think people expected Jacoby Walter to be there, particularly earlier in the season, when I think he opened the year with a big offensive game. But I'm not buying the creativity. I am buying his shot making, and hopefully the defensive tools translate to effective defense. He reminds me of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's kind of the comp I've been giving him throughout the year.
That's the perfect comp. In fact, before that pick was announced, when we had that list of best remaining players, Jacoby Walter was the guy that I was going to highlight. I think he's got great upside. I really do. He kind of had a typical freshman year that he showed you some really great potential, and then he might disappear. It might be for a few segments in a game. It might be for a few games. But there were stretches in watching Baylor this year, guys, where Jacoby Walter might put together 10 or 12 minutes where he looked like a surefire lottery pick. And so I'm looking at some of these players like a Cody Williams. Like, to me, Jacoby Walter showed a lot more, and I mean a lot more potential than Cody Williams showed. So, some freshman inconsistency. And, of course, he played in a great system for guards at Baylor, so I think that hides some errors. 34% from three-point range is pretty respectable for a guy who had some cold stretches. So, again, I think it's a good team for him to be on. Not expected to contribute a whole lot in year one, being picked this late in the draft. put him in the D League, let him get stronger, let him get hungrier, let him learn how to play. It would be great if he could add some playmaking skills. He hasn't really shown that, but he's a bucket now. He's a bucket now, and I think he's going to get a lot better given how young he is.
Yeah, certainly for the Toronto Raptors, they're just at a point now where they have changed their franchise direction. They're looking for guys who can play around Scotty Barnes, and Scotty Barnes is, this new age point forward. We talked about like point guards and trying to find traditional guys in the draft. And Seth, I go back to you on this. When you look at Scotty Barnes as a guy that's going to potentially bring the ball up the floor, going to defend a bunch of different positions, how does Walter fit in with Scotty Barnes and what Scotty brings to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have the potential to complement each other, but I think that Scotty Barnes can do more things, right? Scotty Barnes also a 34% three-point shooter, so he's not a great three-point shooter, but he's certainly a respectable one. But he really gets to the glass, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.5 blocks a game. Jacoby Walter isn't that. He's certainly not that on the defensive end. I think he has it in him. He's kind of a wiry guy. He's not super strong, so he's not just going to, be like a Devin Carter where he can take guys out. He's not physically built like a Stephon Castle, but some folks are late in developing that. A lot of times when I go to an NBA game to cover an NBA game, I see guys that I covered in college and hadn't seen in a while, and I'm just amazed at how much their bodies change over the years. So I'm a big Jacoby Walter guy. I'm telling you. And again, like a Rob Dillingham, I think Jacoby Walter is going to be a better pro than Rob Dillingham, for what it's worth.
So, Wasserman, what do you think of that assessment? I mean, because Rob Dillingham went 8th and Jacoby Walter went 19th. Do you agree with Seth's assessment comparing those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's such different types of guards. Like, where I agree with Seth, like, Rob can hurt your team. I can't, Walter can miss shots and he's not going to hurt your team. And, he's got more room to improve off the dribble, but it's also, he mentioned that Baylor had a bunch of guards, so he was really playing a spot up role here. So I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, where he can go, where Jacoby Walter can go with his game, because it was pretty simple. It was a simplified role that he had at Baylor. But when you compare him to Rob, Rob brings you a lot more creativity, but also a lot more downside because he dances with a lot. He's negative defensively, and he takes some tough shots. Where Jacoby, he's kind of just like a rock solid player, and I think the shot making is going to be there. Forget that 34%. Who cares what he had? I think over 73s this year, and if you followed him in at Lincoln, in high school, like he can make plenty of shots, and so I think he's just a very safe pick, I guess.
I think the second third of this first round, I love Devin Carter at 13, Jared McCain at 16, Dalton Connect at 17. I think when we look back at this draft in years to come, it's like when Tyrese Halliburton was falling, and I was like, Killian Hayes? Why are they taking Killian Hayes ahead of Tyrese Halliburton? What am I missing? I think there's going to be a bunch of guys when we go back and we look at McCain and Connect at 16 and 17, like, how did they end up almost at 20 in this draft? Let's take a look at the players available that we might be able to scream them out in years to come. Well, let's not. The pick is in, number 20 for Cleveland. Jalen Tyson is taken by the Cleveland Cavaliers. What do you make of that, Wasserman?
A-. I mean, I love Jalen Tyson. He's somebody who I had on my radar coming in as like a potential breakout guy, and he certainly was that for Cal, and I kind of keep using this term. He just looks like a pro scorer with how polished he is in terms of his footwork, creating shots for himself, hitting different types of jump shots, followaways, pull-ups, threes. He could play above the rim. I think he's got to improve a little bit off the ball, and it'll be interesting to see, what his role is. I like him more as a second unit guy where he could just be a scorer as opposed to a guy who spots up a lot. He had a really high usage at Cal, so, if he gets that role where he gets to just create and make plays for himself as a second unit guy, I really like that at number 20 overall.
Yeah, I would agree. At 20, I think he's a solid pick. He was a guy a little bit under the radar throughout the college season. It's not like we were all locked in on Cal because they were not an NCAA tournament caliber team. Cal, by the way, was his third college in 3 years. Started off at Texas, then went to Texas Tech. He was one of those guys who was looking to get a waiver early in the season, and then midway through the season, because of some of the legal hits that the NCAA was taking in court, where they wiped out that whole process. But he was able to get eligible and play 31 games for Cal. Shot 36% from three. And really, it's his size and his positional size that brings the intrigue. So he's one of those guys that, you watched during the college season and you thought, well, let's see what happens when we get to that pre-draft process. Played very well at the combine. He was certainly noticeable in those scrimmages to my eyes as someone who physically looked like he could do some things. And then in the private workouts, obviously tested well and has performed well. So going to late first round of the Cavaliers, again, you'd expect him to spend some time in the G League. But he is a guy that, in terms of his maturity and his physicality, he is more ready to play right now in the NBA than a lot of guys who have heard their names called tonight.
All right, we're 20 picks in, about over 2 hours in. So let's go back and look at this draft as it has developed. Going back to the first overall pick, Zach Richarchet. This is a guy that, Wasserman, you had as on your mock draft. You got the first 4 picks right: Richarchet, Alex Sarr, Reed Shepard, and Stephon Castle. How did you have it play out the way that it did, and knew that those would be the first 4 picks in this draft?
How did I do it? I closed my eyes and guessed. I mean, you talk to as many people as you can. I think that the first couple, there was just like a consensus on how it was going to play out. And then, of course, one wrong pick, and it's got the domino effect down the board. So, I hope that I don't get judged by the mock draft that I do on the day of, particularly because I'm doing shows and I can't adjust anyway. But my value, I think, in this space is that I'm giving you guys throughout the year who you can expect to see, and I think my mock drafts in the middle of the season are more important.
Well, how about this? The New Orleans Pelicans select Yves Missi, number 21 in the draft, the 7-footer from Baylor. Looks like they needed a center, and they got one at 21, Wasserman.
Yeah, hey, I got this one right. Give me some credit here. Listen, this is an A minus. I like Missi. I think that he's got a fairly simple game. He's a rim runner, he's a finisher, he's a shot blocker. But I heard in workouts that he's showing a lot more in terms of his ball handling. And I think Baylor ran a lot of plays for him at the top of the key where he got to face up a slower-footed big man and attack him off the dribble. And we saw he could do a little bit of that, like putting the ball down and finishing on the move. But that's probably not going to be something he does often in the NBA. With Yves Missi, he's going to be there to just to play defense. And honestly, I think his perimeter defense is more valuable than his rim protection. He doesn't actually block a ton of shots. I think where he shines the most is in pick and roll, switching out, sliding his feet, not letting guys turn the corner on him. And then he's got great hands around the basket. He'll give you those easy buckets. He'll run the floor. One of those guys whose games translates, it doesn't have super exciting upside because of the lack of skill versatility, but I do think he's got a little bit more face-up game than he was given credit for.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a big Yves Missi guy. Just a really dynamic athlete. When someone is that tall, that long, has a lot of bounce. I know he came to the game late, so he's young for his age as a basketball player, and he's very disruptive defensively. He's not a tremendous shot blocker, but he's a shot alterer, and he's a great help side defender. He's got terrific switchability. He can guard NBA players out to the three-point line. Again, not for the full 24, but for segments of the game if he needs to switch out, if he needs to recover. The big question will be, how much is that skill set going to come along? For somebody who didn't grow up necessarily playing the game the way that a lot of American kids do, American big kids do, you have to wonder if there might be a ceiling there, but it's also very tantalizing to wonder, how much he has to get there. That's what's so fun about the NBA draft. Fun for us because our jobs don't depend on it, but for these NBA teams to really try to be able to project year 2, year 4, year 6, what is Yves Missi going to look like as an offensive player? If he doesn't get any better, he probably won't be in the league. But if he does get better, he could be a starter or certainly a rotational guy on a championship level NBA team because physically, athletically, he just has so many qualities that you absolutely cannot teach.
Well, those are great points you make, and I think for everything that you're saying, this is the perfect situation for him because the New Orleans Pelicans know where their offense is coming from, right? And we saw Zion Williamson play a career high in games, get up and down the floor, create shots for others. And at times you kind of go, okay, Jonas Valanciunas, when Zion's not there, he's perfect. And at times it's kind of a little messy on the floor. But Zion does not give you that same impact on defense. So with Zion on the floor, you kind of look at it like, oh, they're drafting a kid that maybe won't give you as much offensively, but can cover for Zion defensively. And maybe some of those units will be better off. So Wasserman, I think for that reason, for the New Orleans Pelicans, I really like this for this kid, just to be able to be on a team that it seems like it's just a great fit. It doesn't seem like he would fit on every single team, but for the Pelicans, it seems like a really good fit.
Yeah, I know actually New Orleans was hoping he'd be on the board, and they didn't think he would be. I'm getting texts right now. So this was a nice surprise for them. And I think Valanciunas is in the final year of his deal here. So they're going to need some rim protection, some beef up front. And yeah, it's one of those spots where Misi could just kind of play to his strengths there. So I like the fit and I like the pick this late.
Looking ahead to the Phoenix Suns because they are a team that came in with such lofty expectations. Now you got Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, rumors that this team might be trying to move Kevin Durant. What kind of player, what position do you think is the most need for the Phoenix Suns, Wasserman, here?
I don't know if it's about a position. I think you just need to find a contributor. Their depth isn't really there. I mean, they rely so heavily on their big three. And listen, I'm not gonna lie, I don't watch a ton of Phoenix Suns basketball. I gotta watch the French League. I gotta watch G League. So I don't get NBA is not a priority for me. However, I do see their roster, and it looks like they need depth. And when they pay those three guys that much money, you have to find just value contracts, production on these rookie deals. So anybody they think that can come in and play a role fast is something that I'd imagine they value. I have them taking Ryan Dunn. That's just, no, I have no intel on that. That's who I have. I think Dunn is a guy who can, it's just another play to his strengths guy. Just get out there and wreak havoc defensively and fly in the open floor and play off other skill players. So, that was kind of my logic in projecting Ryan Dunn to Phoenix. But yeah, I don't think you can be.
I have to stop you there and say that I hope you're wrong because I'm looking at our draft and I'm like, we're 2 picks away from the Knicks potentially getting him, right? And I'm like, please, I hope I got my fingers crossed that you're incorrect because every Knicks mock draft, we have the Wahoo Wah, the Tony Bennett product coming to the New York Knicks. So, Wasserman, I respect you. I like you to be right because I know how much this is your Super Bowl here. But in this particular case, I just hope you're wrong because I think that he would be great for the New York Knicks. That's it. That's
Yeah,
all
I mean, he would be. He was a Long Island guy like myself. And, I think the question with New York now after that Mikal Bridges trade is like how many, and you got Bridges, you got OG, you got Hart. It's like, I guess you can never have enough defensive wings, but
there you go.
They prioritize something else.
There you go, right, Seth? You can never have too many defensive wings. That's the truth about the NBA, especially if you're going to try to defend the Boston Celtics, the now reigning champs.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to me that you as a Knicks fan are that high on Ryan Dunn. I mean, I hadn't necessarily been picking up on that. I mean, I'll give you a sleeper for that Knicks pick in terms of somebody who could space the floor a little bit and show some moxie. It would be Baylor Shireman from Creighton as a guy who can really, really space the floor. Maybe a tad high at 24, but not too much so. I mean, at some point, don't you want to score the ball, make the game a little easier? You just want to grind your way to an NBA title here, Chris. What are we looking to do?
You said NBA title. That's all that matters.
Right.
Trade alert. Phoenix is trading the 22nd pick to Denver, which takes Deron Holmes. So that is actually going to the Denver Nuggets. All right, Deron Holmes. Wasserman, what say you?
Well, in my mock draft, I have the Denver Nuggets selecting Deron Holmes just at number 28.
Yeah,
So, listen, I like.
And you're right.
Holmes.
You're right. We're
I'll give this
counting that as a win.
that's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. I need all the W's I can get here. Listen, I like Holmes, and one of the reasons I like Holmes, other than the athleticism and stuff, is that he goes to the combine last year. Scouts give him specific things he needs to work on and add, and he did it. I mean, he became a threatening shooter this year. He became a guy who can attack closeouts and put the ball down. And so, if those are real, if those actually translate, then we have something really interesting. This is what did I give it? Did I not give it a grade? Did I say let's give it a B? I probably would have taken him a little bit later. He's a little bit lower on my personal board, but the athleticism around the rim you can't teach. He's always top 3 in the country in dunks. He's a walking easy basket, and if the shooting improvement translates, I think it was 38% on not too high a volume. Dayton didn't need him to stand away from the basket too much. He's too effective around it. But if you can add that 3 ball to complement the athleticism around the hoop, then you have something really interesting, and obviously more interesting if he can attack closeouts and put the ball down. He improved his passing this year as well. Like, I just love the fact that scouts told him he needed to improve certain skills, and he did exactly that. So being able to improve is a skill in itself. So we'll see how he adjusts once he gets to the next level. I'm kind of, is he a rim protector? Is he a power forward? I'm not really sure it matters if he's coming off the bench for a playoff team like Denver. So interesting pick. He's one of the guys I'm really excited to see where his development goes, just based on what I said. We've seen him kind of evolve a little bit each year, but of course he's super interesting because of just how athletic he is inside.
Yeah, and getting to play with Nikola Jokic, that's going to be a gift. We've seen what it has done for Aaron Gordon over the past couple of years, how it makes the game easy for him. Here's some more details on the trade between the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns. So the Nuggets send the 28th pick and a 56th pick and 2 future second-round picks to the Suns to move up just, 6 spots. So, Seth, I mean, clearly the Nuggets had Holmes circled like this is a guy that we could use that fits into what we're trying to do as a team 1 year removed from winning the championship.
Yeah, I mean, I was nodding my head along with a lot of what Was is saying because I'm a big Deron Holmes guy, and the improvability, if that's a word, is the essential piece here. I mean, he made 1 3-pointer his freshman year at Dayton. He improved. He was a 32% three-point shooter, only 6 of 19 as a sophomore. Put his name in the draft, got the feedback, and he was a 39% three-point shooter as a junior, while still being very effective around the rim. It's not like he said, okay, that's all I'm going to do. So he's shown the ability to improve, and now he's a spacer and physically can step into an NBA game right now and hold his own. And he's walking into a situation. I think the guys, even though I know the money isn't the same, but the guys who are being picked at this point in the draft, I think are in the best situations. I think it is very, very difficult for any rookie to walk into the NBA and try to be an effective player from day one, especially if they're young. Now, Deron Holmes is a little bit older than a lot of these other younger players going at the top of the draft, going to bad teams who are going to need them to produce more. He can come off the bench, spell Jokic, spell MPJ, spell Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, maybe spend some time in the G League if the minutes aren't there for him, become part of a championship-level organization, and bring that level of maturity and toughness. And by the way, one point that I think is important to make is because we think about, because now we're talking about the Nuggets who are going to, obviously an NBA title contender. And we try to picture, well, can Deron Holmes help them win games in the Western Conference Final, win games in the NBA Final. He may not be on the court in those games, but you know what? There are a lot of games between October and May that are getting played where you're not necessarily at full health, and winning 3 to 5 more games can be the difference between being the number 1 seed and the number 3 seed. So he's a guy who I think is going to bring a lot of value to this organization right away as a rookie, but also moving forward, because they're going to know how to develop him.
to your point, the guys that they've drafted over the last 4 years, whether it's Julian Strother or Peyton Watson or Christian Brown, like they played less minutes in the playoffs, but during the regular season, those guys won them some games. And of course, that affects the seeding, especially in the Western Conference. You need those guys. For Holmes, Wasserman, who's his best current NBA player comp? Who is he most like?
I think I compared him, and this isn't perfect, but I compared him to Trace Jackson Davis. Similar because they kind of just added a little bit more each year. They improved their passing, they improved their touch a little bit more. Realistically, they're on the floor for what they do inside. Holmes just keeps hard to put a comparison on a guy who keeps changing. So I don't. It's hard to really give him one, but I think early on he's going to be more of a Jackson Davis type who works around the post, plays a lot of pick and rolls. But if the three ball becomes part of his arsenal on a regular basis, then obviously that comparison has to change.
Well, Seth, this is a bigger topic of discussion when I look at the NBA draft. And guys who spend 2 or 3 years and show improvement, I'm surprised they don't go higher, right? Like when you're explaining DaRon Holmes and I'm like, wait, he's 21 years old, right? 6'9", 236, the right size. And you're telling me he added something to his game every year. So theoretically, if I'm an organization, I'm thinking he'll continue to add to his game. And I think that's why a championship organization like the Denver Nuggets can spot him and move up and go get him. And I think we should see more of that going forward in the NBA draft.
I think so too. I mean, every argument, there's data and facts to underlie it. And I know these guys live in the numbers. So I would be curious to see if this whole way of thinking where you like someone who's not as good of a player, but he's 19 over somebody who's a better player, but he's 23, because you think that the 23-year-old has topped out, when we all know that in the grand scheme of things, at 23, you're really a baby. Your life is just starting. And so the idea that you can't improve and improve significantly at the age of 23, I just don't buy it. So because someone is 23, to me, doesn't feel like they're a finished product, especially as we talk about DaRon Holmes, as Wass has pointed out, someone who's already shown the ability to improve. Why would you think that just because he's got a 2 at the beginning of his age number that he's going to stop improving? There are guys who have been in the NBA 7, 8 years who are still making significant strides. That's just the way that it goes. So, I see some of these other guys like a Tristan da Silva. Like, I'm not sure why Tristan da Silva is thought to be a better pro prospect than DaRon Holmes. I think DaRon Holmes was a significantly better college player. So I don't know if that's oversimplifying it, but that's certainly what my eyes have seen.
All right, here is a look at Seth's sleepers still on the board. Who do you like to be the next guy off the board, Seth?
Well, I don't know if any of these guys are going in the first round. I mean, I think Shireman is a little bit of an X factor just because of the shooting piece there. Tristan Newton, I'd maybe like to hear Wass's opinion on him. For a guy who was the best point guard in college basketball, won 2 back-to-back championships as a starting point guard, most people are projecting he either doesn't get drafted at all or is getting drafted late in the second round. You think he's going to hear his name called tomorrow night?
Sorry, who are we talking about?
I'm sorry, Tristan Newton.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy he's got a chance. I thought it was interesting that at the NBA Combine he chose to skip scrimmaging. I don't know if that was because a team told him to do that, or if that was, confidence in where he's going, or, I don't know. But he's the type of guy where I think in the 45 to 60 range, you just you throw out some of the typical traditional laws of scouting and just say, this guy does a lot. He helped Connecticut win games in so many different ways. And it's an eye of the beholder thing. All it takes is one team to buy a winner like him. But yeah, he doesn't on paper fit the bill of a classic NBA guard.
Yeah, great points that you guys make. And, you kind of look at everyone and you hope that there's a spot for every player and that they at least get the opportunity. So especially when you see a kid is a 2-time national champion running the show, it just feels like there should be an opportunity for him. The Milwaukee Bucks are on the clock, and we know what's happened with them the past couple of years. I mean, they win the championship. Giannis wins 2 MVPs, a Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, but has been injured in the playoffs the last 2 years. a team that traded away Drew Holiday. Now Drew Holiday has won another championship. So the Milwaukee Bucks, as the years have gone on, Chris Middleton also suffering through injuries and not the same player. Damian Lillard clearly getting older. They need a little bit of youth and trying to figure out someone who could step on the floor and play for them. I feel like this is a very important pick. They've been trying to get some of these draft picks right the past couple of years. And really, Wasserman, it hasn't worked out for them. So of the guys on the board, is there anyone that you see as like, okay, he's ready to come in and contribute? Because that feels like what the Bucks need here.
Yeah, I mean, again, Ryan Dunn, I know we just talked about him. Kyle Filipowski is still on the board, correct? I mean, he's somebody I think could play a little bit of a role early. I like Shireman. As Seth said, I have Shireman going to the Knicks at 24. We'll see if that actually happens. But yeah, I think at this point you take an older guy.
Well, the pick is in. Milwaukee selecting A.J. Johnson from the NBL at 23 in the NBA draft. Wasserman, can you enlighten us on A.J. Johnson?
I just got a flashback to when Milwaukee took Thon Maker at 10.
Wow.
Listen, A.J. Johnson is, I wonder that if he didn't have a couple of nice flashes at the NBA Combine, if he even gets drafted at all. He barely played overseas. This falls under the category of most surprising pick of the draft, mainly because barely played. I think he averaged maybe 3 points a game or something like that overseas. He chooses to, skip college. He was highly touted recruit. I see the appeal to it. By the way, this grade gets a C. I think this is a C. I'm not a big fan of his. And let's talk about the positives. He is a big, athletic, Jamal Crawford-like guard. I don't think he's really a point guard, although it's what he's going to try and sell, what he may have sold Milwaukee on. He is a scorer. I'm not really sure if he's a good shooter yet. I don't think he's a great decision maker yet. I think it's right now, the best way to put it is we like the idea of A.J. Johnson. Whether or not that idea actually comes to life, we're guessing here because he pretty much took off this season. He showed up at the Combine. He played pretty well. He had a couple nice flashes of self-creation into a step back. He had maybe the highlight of the Combine on a driving dunk that showed off his athleticism, but he is 167 pounds, and at 6'4", he is super thin. I don't think he's polished enough in any aspect of the game, and I think when you're a guard, you can't be raw. I mean, the guards are the ones that have to have the most skill on the floor. I think he's just so far away. It's just funny because we're talking about Milwaukee needing a guy to come in and make things happen.
Yes, yeah.
I can't picture A.J. Johnson stepping on an NBA floor, at least, at all over the next season. And then, again, with a guy like this, there's just so much guesswork in terms of how he's going to develop. Sure, the potential is there. I haven't seen enough to make me confident that he's going to reach it.
Tell us what you really think.
You said a C. That sounds like an F-, by the way.
Yeah.
You said a C. You seem like you're a great grader, like you grade on a curve.
Well, look, it depends on what you expect, and it depends on what your philosophy is as a franchise. I mean, everyone, for obvious reasons, loving Drew Holiday and what he was able to do for the Celtics, but you can't grade a trade when your best two guys are hurt. And when you got Giannis and Damian Lillard hurt in the playoffs, what is Doc Rivers supposed to do? What are the Bucks supposed to do?
Whoa.
Here we go. Coming to my Wizards.
Knicks are trading the 24th pick to the Washington Wizards. So for those that aren't paying close attention here, the Wizards traded into the 14th pick after taking Alex Sarr, right, with the second pick. They traded with the Portland Trailblazers for the 14th pick. Now they're trading with the New York Knicks for the 24th pick in the draft. Seth, that would be 3 first-round picks in their first year of truly rebuilding. What do you make of it?
Well, I guess we don't know yet what they're giving up for this pick. But, for me, as a snake-bitten Bullets and Wizards fan, all my life I go back to the days of Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld and Kevin Greavy. What this tells me is that if they're getting 3 first-round draft picks, they're going to be better next year. They will not be good enough to make the playoffs, but they won't be bad enough to draft Cooper Flagg. So this is exactly where the Wizards are. They tanked for this draft, and they got Alex Sarr out of it. So we'll see who they pick at that position. Again, I'd like to see who they gave up. But just to get back real quick to the Bucks and A.J. Johnson. So I would not be surprised. Like if you told me right now A.J. Johnson is not going to play a single game for the Milwaukee Bucks next season, he's going to spend the entire year in the G League, that wouldn't surprise me. But if you also told me that A.J. Johnson 5 or 6 years from now is going to be an all-star, that wouldn't shock me either. And so that's the pick that you're making. It's funny that you said about what he did at the Combine. His ability, he's only 6'4", and he's got a super narrow frame, almost like, a Tayshaun Prince back in the day, that I don't think he's going to be able to build a lot of strength on it. But the way that he attacks the basket, the way that he can get above the rim is something that just excites NBA teams. So if you're the Bucks, late first round, you already have a championship caliber team if you can keep everybody healthy. You're not going to get a ton of value at this point of the draft, although I do think a guy like Shireman would have been perfect for them. He's an older 50-year senior guy. But A.J. Johnson, clearly a future play. We'll see how it pans out.
All right, so in the chat, some guy named D. Zaddy says, Knicks all day, baby. You got to wait, my friend. You got to wait. All right, the pick is in, and it's going to the Washington Wizards. Oh, no, here's the actual trade details. Knicks traded the 24th pick to the Wizards for 26 and 51. Washington selects Keyshawn George. So Keyshawn George of the Wasserman, we talked about this. What was it? 7 points per game at the University of Miami.
Yeah, I mean, he's another idea. I mean, you love the idea of a 6'8" guy who can handle and shoot, but right, not highly productive. I mean, the flashes were very enticing, guys. Those big wings that can make plays off the dribble, and he was a 40% three-point shooter. I think that's what you have to buy is the positional size and the shooting. I'm giving this grade a B minus. I get why teams would see upside. I don't, because I'm not buying the creation flashes. I just don't think he's quick enough off the bounce, and he has no explosion around the rim. So I think you're getting a big shooter who can handle it, but I don't think the handle is going to be functional enough because of his lack of speed that he's going to be able to do much with the ball handling. But yeah, I mean, he's a fun young guy, and 40% three-point shooting for a 6'8" guard. Even though I can't even call him a winger forward because he's just not physical enough to guard that position. But yeah, this late in the draft, I get it. I don't think I expected him to be there. He was a green room invite pretty early, and so yeah, let's Washington really better hope that he builds some strength here and maybe gets a little bit more explosive as he adds muscle.
Well, Seth, you said a few minutes ago that the Wizards won't be in the Cooper Flag business. I can almost guarantee you that they will be in the Cooper Flag Ace Bailey sweepstakes. Looking at this draft so far, it seems like a lot of a lot of projects of these prospects, right? Like Alex Sarr, but Bub Carrington and Keyshawn George. I don't think these guys are going to have immediate impacts in the NBA.
So, Keyshawn George is a 6'8" wing from Switzerland who didn't show any defensive prowess whatsoever, averaged about 8 points a game in 23 minutes for a team that did not make the NCAA tournament. Sounds like a Washington Wizard to me. I think he'll fit in perfectly with their G League franchise. I mean, who knows how he pans out? Again, Washington was not the only team that is enamored with his skill set, his combination. I think Was puts it perfectly, and like you said with A.J. Johnson, about liking the idea of a player. You see a 6'8" guy who can handle and shoot a little bit on the wing. He's got that European style combination, and you think you can project him forward, but it's not something that strikes me as somebody like we've said who's going to come in next year and have a huge impact. So we'll see. He can shoot the ball, he can play in space, that's for sure, and those guys usually find a way to make money in this league.
Well, clearly the Wizards thought that potentially the Knicks might take him with one of these picks, right? Because the Wizards were sitting there at 26. The Knicks were at 24, and the Wizards moved up 2 spots to go get him. So it's almost like if you think the Knicks aren't going to take him, he'd be sitting there 2 spots later, and they gave up also the 51st pick in the draft to go get him. So really interesting to see a team just move up 2 slots for a player that could have potentially been there, Wasserman. They must have had some intel that maybe the Knicks were going to take him off the board.
Also, there's some speculation, or before the draft, and maybe after the Bridges trade yesterday, that the Knicks were going to trade one of those 2 picks, and maybe Washington was nervous about a team moving up and taking one of those Knicks picks to take Keyshawn George. But yeah, I mean, they obviously targeted him and didn't want to take any chances. So you move up 2 spots, and the Knicks are going to say, sure. I mean, they did that the same deal with Emmanuel Quickly and Deuce McBride, where Leon Rose likes to just move back 2 spots. He listens. I would love to be a fly on the wall and hear who initiated those conversations, who made the call first, because it is a theme with the Knicks and Leon just moving back a couple spots. But yeah, I mean, we'll see with George. There's so much. Again, I've used this term a couple times. There's a lot of guesswork and uncertainty with him. But I would have, if it was me, I would have let somebody else make that pick.
Well, the fans are chiming in on the chat here on Bleacher Report on this live NBA draft coverage. Ringel, I think that's his name, says Keyshawn needed to go later, right? That you could potentially get him later in the first round or maybe even the second round. And Penn Simmons says, big guard with handle but lacks speed. Sounds like Luka. No, he doesn't. He does not sound like Luka. There's nothing about this pick that sounds like Luka Doncic. Nothing at all. Can we all just agree on that? That we do not think
maybe just not even
George.
have that conversation at all and waste our breath.
Yeah. All right. But I love it when I can't tell if people are trolling on the chat or if they're serious. But I love when it's like that place where I'm like, oh, I would love to go in on this person because, Seth, you know how it is.
Oh,
You've been in a
welcome
gym.
to my world, man.
And somebody will tell you
world.
something just so insane that you're like, no, like.
I know. But, I get caught into this, working with many of the same guys you do down in Atlanta. Like I remember, because when we compare players, when I make a comparison, I'm not necessarily saying he's as good as. I'm saying he kind of plays like, because we want our viewers and our listeners.
Yeah.
So I remember many years ago when Mitch McGary was at Michigan, and I said on the air something effective that, he kind of reminds me of Blake Griffin. And Steve Smith went ballistic, like, Blake Griffin? And you just compare him to Blake? I said, I didn't think he's as good as Blake Griffin. He's a big power guy with bounce who steps away from the rim, who's more athletic than you think. And leave me alone, Smitty, right? So, but the folks who watch us and try to troll us like to get our blood up, and it's not hard to do sometimes.
I just love how you had Smitty down to a T because he's always so smooth and even keeled.
He is. You got to rile.
You got to rile. With a hot take.
Yeah, no, I know where his buttons are, man. I spent a lot of time with Smitty, as I know you have too.
But this is the most important part of the draft, okay? Because we have talked about how the Knicks are going to be in the second apron going forward. OG Anunoby, what is it, that 5-year and like $215 million extension that he signed, and then trading for Mikal Bridges. They're not going to have many draft picks going forward. They got 2 picks here. And if you look at the history of what the Knicks have done with these late first-round picks, Quentin Grimes, Miles McBride, Emmanuel Quickly, Mitchell Robinson, Seth, they've really nailed it the past 5 or 6 years in this range with guys who've come in and contributed, even if they've taken a few years to develop.
Well, I think it's fair to say that in this instance, they won't be taking anyone from Villanova. Villanova has not had a
They got 4 Wildcats. I think it's enough.
And I promise that my good friend and now television colleague Jay Wright is not coming through that door. He has coached his last game, but to me, the Knicks, partly because they have so many good Villanova players and just added a great one in Mikal Bridges, just a great example of culture. Like, you have to honor your culture. You have to have a culture. You have to have an identity. And then you have to kind of stick with it. Sometimes the best players are the ones that you don't get. The best decisions are the ones that you don't make. And so I think the Knicks have drafted well. They have traded well. They have signed well to try to stay consistent with that culture, getting a little bit lucky sometimes. You know, when they traded for Jalen Brunson, I don't think a lot of people were projecting that he would be an MVP caliber player, but I do know that they made that pick on culture. So they put themselves in position to get lucky. And sometimes that's even more important than getting lucky. So I'll be curious to see who they pick here. I think they should take Shireman. Get a shooter, get a spacer, somebody who can, who can play out far away from the rim. That dude's got in the gym range. I could see him opposite DiVincenzo, and then they have all those sort of athletic defensive wings falling in. That's what I think they should do.
There's something developing here that we can't ignore, Wasserman. Isaiah Collier, right? On your big board, I see him 9. We talked about him a little earlier. We're down to pick 25, and he's still not off the board. Is there something else going on with him outside of – we'll have to discuss that a little bit later. The pick is in, and the New York Knicks are selecting the Hakoum Nidier at 25. Wasserman, we discussed him yesterday. What do you think of this pick by the New York Knicks?
This is a B-plus pick. The Knicks are deep, and whoever they draft is probably going to be just an insurance play in case 10 guys get hurt again, because they are a veteran team with a pretty deep bench. So Dadier, I don't know if he's coming over right away. I don't know if there's been discussions about that, but I really like his game. He's really grown on me throughout the season. He's a NBA-sized wing who shoots the ball well. He shoots it off the dribble. He's a guy who produced in Germany, playing without the ball a lot, cutting, running the floor. And I always say about him, he's got a very adaptable game. And we didn't get to see him play on the ball a ton in terms of, creating for himself. He's not the craziest athlete in the world. I'm not sure he's like a lockdown defender type, but he's got a very versatile skill set, and he's somebody who you could just plug. He's going to fit everywhere because of his off-ball skill set, but super young. He plays a very mature game, and we'll see if he comes over right away. Of course, with the Knicks, you always got to see if they even keep this pick. But to take him at 25 suggests that they had been clearly scouting him for a while. And I know their international scout, and he's lives overseas. He's I'm sure he's very familiar with Dadier, and a lot of these teams have grown on him throughout the season. So he's somebody I think has just every month moved up the board a little bit higher. And it'll be. I mean, there's still a little bit of uncertainty with him in terms of does he come over or not, but clearly a long-term play here, and not somebody they expect to be part of this upcoming rotation.
Yeah, that's a little bit of, again, what we're talking about with the Bucks and A.J. Johnson. Like that's that's really the first decision that you're making. Like, what are we looking to do? Do we need someone who can come in and play right away? Do we have a positional need? Do we have a certain skill set, a certain body type that we need for this team right away? For the Knicks, I'm a little bit surprised in that because, again, you make this trade for Mikal Bridges, you trade away a ton of draft picks. It feels like you're playing for now. So now you've drafted a guy who hasn't even reached his 19th birthday. He's a good player, certainly has some upside, some range, talking about a 36% three-point shooter. So he certainly has all of the tools that you can see projected moving forward, but he does not strike me as someone who's going to have a high impact on this coming season. You put him in the G League, maybe you draft and stash him and leave him overseas and leave some cap room to make some other moves. So there's a lot more going on here than I think just pick. Like, for example, Kyle Filipowski at Duke. Physically right now, you could say whatever you want about his agility, his foot speed. He's not a surefire success in the NBA, but he is a 7-footer who knows how to play and can shoot three-pointers. And so if you want someone who can impact you right away, that's the type of player that you pick. If you're looking for someone that you can stash or develop down the line and create some cap space for yourself, then Dadier is a better pick.
Yeah, and for the Knicks, it seems like this center position is one that they truly need to address with uncertainty with Isaiah Hartenstein and also Mitchell Robinson, because they went out and got Mikal Bridges. They brought back OG Anunoby. They're running out of cap space, and it seems like they won't be able to keep both of those guys. Interesting to see them go with yet another forward, like you guys are saying, not going to be able to take the floor. And what they'll do with pick number 26 here, the Knicks are still on the clock, back-to-back picks. Of course, they traded down with the Washington Wizards, who were in that 26 spot to get up. Still on the board, the Denver Nuggets were at 28. They traded up to take their guy, Deron Holmes, at 22, and then now the Phoenix Suns are back on the board at 28. So some interesting things when we look at the back end of this. I want to look at the guys that are still available, and there's someone that I find really interesting that I don't know if he's going to go in the first round, and that's Tyler Kolek. I mean, here's a guy, Seth Davis, that, you know, the nerd alert people ask me about all the time. Like, Chris, what do you think of Tyler Kolek? I'm like, I guess I got to watch more of him. And Isaiah Collier. Like, there are guys that are on the board now that I'm like, all right, we're getting to a place that I'm wondering if they're going to go in the first round. Can you tell us about Kolek first and then Collier, like why we're seeing them, you know, where we are now not taken off the board?
Well, first of all, in terms of Collier, like I'm looking up there, I'm seeing Terrence Shannon. And so to me, Terrence Shannon is a better version of Isaiah Collier. Similar players, both amazing downhill players. Put the ball in their hands in the open court, and they're mini LeBrons, really, with the way they're able to physically overpower people. Not saying they're as good as LeBron. I'm not saying they're as good as LeBron. I'm saying they're mini LeBrons in terms of their ability to get downhill. Terrence Shannon, an older player, a better shooter. Terrence Shannon would be a great New York Knick. I think Tyler Kolek would be a really good fit culturally as well with the New York Knicks. You know, he's not going to overwhelm you with his speed. He's not going to dunk over you, but he can run your team. He can play defense. He can make shots. For the last 2 years, he's been one of the best point guards, if not arguably the best point guard when he was healthy in college basketball. So again, I wouldn't say he's a surefire success in the NBA, but you know, looking at those guys up on the board right now, you know, Johnny Furphy is an interesting prospect as a guy who can space the floor and knock down shots, sneaky good athlete. But in terms of guys who can have an impact right now on an NBA game, the one that jumps out at me are Terrence Shannon. And I've already, in a different way, I've been talking about Baylor Shireman as a guy who's just a really, really good shooter, big guy, and also as a guard, outstanding rebounder. So I would say if I'm drafting for the Knicks right now, I'm going to take Shireman.
Yeah, they're not picking.
Oh, I thought they had the next pick.
Yeah,
Are they trading that away?
They're trading that away for Dylan Jones.
There you go. There you go. Poor Knicks fans. There we go.
Okay, so the Thunder are back on the board for Dylan Jones at 26. So for the Knicks, making a lot of moves in this draft. It just feels like lateral moves, if you will. They made their big moves of the day, right? Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, but Dylan Jones going to the Knicks. To the Thunder. Wasserman, what do you think of Dylan Jones?
First off, with the Knicks, like that, I guess they're just not going to waste first-round contracts. You know, money on first-round guys who are not going to play. I guess that's the philosophy here. They also have a 38th pick, you know, with a non-guaranteed deal. That's probably an equal caliber player that they can get at 26. B+ for Dylan Jones. I really like his game. He's you either like his game or you see you either see versatility or you see a tweener. Like, how does he fit in the NBA has really been the big question. He was a very high usage guy at Weber State, like a 6'6" point wing. He put up crazy numbers. In fact, I think he averaged 20, 10, and almost 5. I don't think anyone's ever done that in terms of that type of production in college, and over 2 steals a game too. I mean, with him, I started to buy the creation off the dribble. I think I was a little bit skeptical of it coming into last year, but he's gotten so much better at just handling the ball, getting to his spots. He's strong. He plays through contact. He can finish in a lot of different ways, and he's a very good passer. I mean, playmaking is really what separates him for a guy who's built like an NFL tight end. And shooting has always been a question mark with him. So, you know, the pessimist will see a guy who, well, is he going to be able to create at an NBA level? Is he quick enough? And if you put him off the ball, is he a good enough shooter? So, you know, the people who see a tweener question what position he plays, and the people that like him see a point wing.
Well, Lakers legacy, they got a lot of Seth Davis going on here. Put up Sean Marion, Blake Griffin lines last year. Jay Will with worse three-point shooting but better rebounding. Flashes of Jalen Williams from the Thunder. And then the Thunder draft him. So Seth, maybe the Oklahoma City Thunder see Jalen Williams in this 26th pick and going with Dylan Jones.
But is he as good as Mitch McGary is what I want to know, because that's the bar that he really has to clear.
I think he might be better.
Again, we're at the end of the first round. I think he's a good pick. Played obviously at the mid-major level, so his usage rate, I'm honestly not close enough to the situation to know the answer to this question. On the one hand, you say played 4 years at Weber State. Certainly something to admire, the consistency, sticking it out, the relationships. But on the other hand, you're saying, I'd kind of like to see him do it against a high major competition and do what a Dalton Connect did and see if those numbers are there. Because, the three-point shooting piece, he shot 35%. Again, he's a 6'6" wing. So he's going to need to make outside shots and be a floor spacer in the NBA. 35% as a sophomore from three-point range, 30% as a junior, and only 32% this year. So I'm not saying he's a finished product, but he did play 4 years in college at a program at Weber State where he could do just about anything he wanted, and he still only shot 32% from three. So physically, I think he's ready. I think he has proven himself worthy of being a late first round, early second round pick. But again, if that shooting piece doesn't come around, he's not going to be in this league for long.
I mean, led the conference in scoring, assist, defensive rebounds. When you talk about a guard and a guy with ability, I mean, it just seems like he's one of those guys where if you're drafting here, Wasserman, it just feels like, okay, if he's a boom, you really lucked out, and if he doesn't work out, it's not that big of a loss for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he just checks a lot of boxes, and you have to hope some of those boxes translate. And of course, shooting is a big swing skill for him. If it'll be curious how they use him, because he was at such a high usage guy. Like Seth said, he was able to do whatever he wanted at Weber State. So it'll be interesting to see what role he has for that team.
The Thunder are sending 5 second-round picks between 2025 and 2027 to the Knicks. And obviously, again, the Knicks sent a boatload of draft picks to the Nets for Mikal Bridges, right? Like, so they needed to try to get something back. Those aren't first-round picks. Those are second-round picks. But just to have something to either move in the future or try to get players, I mean, that's just an interesting move for the Thunder to get up to 26. But at the same token, we all know that Sam Presti had 5,048 draft picks over the next 5 years. So just two teams who just have a treasure chest. Like, we got to get rid of these some way, somehow.
I can't remember a deal like that. 5 second-round picks for number 26 overall. First of all, that tells you that the Thunder were really targeting Dylan Jones.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make sure that they got him. 5 second round. Listen, they're all not going to be the Thunder's picks. So I know the Thunder usually pick at the bottom, because they're going to be championship contenders. But I'm assuming those picks are from other teams, and some of those picks could be early second rounders.
And Terrence Shannon is off the board. So the Minnesota Timberwolves add Terrence Shannon along with Rob Dillingham in this draft. And Wasserman, you had Terrence Shannon as a guy still high on your board. What are the Timberwolves getting?
I mean, this is an A. Shannon is he is so explosive that even if some of the other stuff doesn't carry over, he's got a specialty, and it's speed, explosion. He's going to put a ton of pressure on defenses. The second that you get a defensive rebound, he's just going to go. And defensively, I think he has excellent defensive tools. So I like this pick. He shouldn't have slipped this far, probably. And over the course of his career, listen, he's not a consistent shooter, but he is a very dangerous shot maker and somebody who can really catch fire. We saw it towards the end of the season. He put up some monster scoring numbers, and his ball handling has gotten better too. Like, he's not just plow through traffic or just try and blow by them. He's got some moves to his game. He's improved his one-on-one scoring over the course of his 5-year career, which you hope people do over that length of time in college basketball. But really, his specialty is just explosiveness, power, defensive quickness, and in a more reduced role where he's not a number one option like he was in Illinois. I really think that combination that he brings is going to be effective.
Oh, just add some speed, athleticism, and defense to the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team, Seth, that apparently needed more of that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they really had a disappointing season. I mean, to get a player of this caliber at 27, it just doesn't happen. I mean, we can go over these last 10 picks, and none of them were as good as Terrence Shannon. I'm just telling you. And so first of all, he averaged 23 points a game for a Big Ten team that made the Elite Eight. Of course, lost to UConn. Like everybody else did in the tournament. Doesn't think about him as a great outside shooter, 36%. There's your guy, Ryan Dunn, going at 28. I just want to finish this thought on Terrence Shannon because his three-point shooting percentage was 36%, which is pretty good. But as we all know, he went through a 3-week suspension after he was arrested on charges of rape, which he was later found not guilty for. When he came back, he was an effective player, but he went through a terrible three-point shooting slump. That was the last piece to come. So if you take out those 5 or 6 games immediately after his suspension, I would bet that his three-point shooting percentage is closer to 40 or maybe even above 40%. So he's a great pick at 27. And then conversely, Ryan Dunn at 28 going to Phoenix. Ryan Dunn is all about defense, and I think he is a great fit with the Suns because, as we know, they are not lacking for scores in the desert. They got all the scores they need. They need defense. They need culture. They need someone who's going to come off a bench, play a role, be a good citizen in that locker room, be a good citizen in that organization. 28th pick in the draft, Ryan Dunn. Phoenix got to be very happy with this.
Yeah, Phoenix Suns with the 28th pick in the draft. They select Ryan Dunn out of UVA. And Wasserman, when you look at the Suns, they need guys who can come in and play, and they need defense. Ryan Dunn seems like a player that can bring that to the floor.
Yeah, I give this an A-. First of all, can we discuss that I had Phoenix taking Ryan Dunn at 22, and I had the Nuggets taking Deron Holmes at 28, and they flip-flopped. And guess what? I'm not going to get credit for getting either of those picks.
You'll get credit with us, my friend. You'll get credit.
You get partial credit.
All right, I'll take any credit. But, yeah, Dunn is, let's talk a little numbers here. A 10% block percentage for a wing is unheard of. A 3% steal percent. I mean, this guy, when he's in the game, he makes defensive plays. And that's what's going to be his moneymaker in the NBA. I think the only other guy who came close to those numbers was Matisse Thybulle. And I think those are very similar types of players in terms of just defensive-minded wings. They're outliers because usually as a wing player, you need ball handling, you need shooting, and neither of those guys really have either of them. But I think he's so good defensively that as long as you put the right guys around him, you can get away, you can mask some of his offensive limitations. But his job offensively is going to just be tap into your athleticism, fly on the open floor, finish plays around the basket, and then just make plays for us defensively. And he could find a spot in the rotation. So that's really the sales pitch to Ryan Dunn. If he's able to just make an open jump shot, I mean, then his value skyrockets. But even without it, I think he adds a really interesting element of defensive versatility, of defensive playmaking.
Seth, it seems like Ryan Dunn's going to a great situation because this is a team that needs guys who are willing to play defense, who can stay on the floor because they impact the game in that way. And from everything I'm hearing from you guys, Ryan Dunn seems like a guy who can come in. You can put him at like either guard position because you got Devin Booker or Bradley Beal on the floor, or really you could technically have all three of those guys on the floor at the same time because of their size. It just seems like a perfect fit for them where, to Wasserman's point, getting them at 28 seems like a steal.
Yeah, I'm not, and I guess I am a basketball expert, but I think it's going to be very hard to shoot if you don't have the ball physically in your hands. And walk into the Suns, if everybody's healthy, of course. Phoenix was an absolute disaster in terms of their health this season. But if everybody is healthy, and of course Grayson Allen came on and played great, then Ryan Dunn's not going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to come in as a spot defensive stopper, maybe try to get them over the hump in those games where you don't have a Beal or a Booker or some combination thereof. Spend some time in the G League working on your offensive skills. I think that would actually be a good situation for him. But again, getting picked late in the first round, I think he brings high value. It's just super interesting that we have Isaiah Collier still on the board, Kyle Filipowski still on the board. We're down to the last 2 picks of the first round. And there's
not anymore.
There's Isaiah Collier going to Salt Lake City.
The Utah Jazz select Isaiah Collier out of USC at 29. And Wasserman, you had him as the 9th best prospect on your board.
This is an A+ for me.
Wow.
Again, I think people are over to get him at 29. I mean, listen, he may not be, a top 15 starting NBA point guard in the league, but at 29, I think the things that he does well, which is attack, get out in the open floor. He's a high-level creator. I mean, half court, he makes a lot of plays. He makes a lot of mistakes too. But I think if you put him in a 6-man role where he doesn't have to be a make decisions for an entire game, I think the Jazz are going to get a ton of value with him coming off the bench with the unique element of speed and power and creativity and playmaking. He does pass. I mean, some turnovers might come from it. If he just improves his shot a little bit, I mean, I think he went from overrated to being a total value pick in this draft. And I know NBA guys are turned off by a ball-dominant guard who doesn't shoot and turns the ball over. But instead of picturing him as a 35-minute per game lead guard, picture him as a 20-minute per game bench spark. And I think there's a lot more to like for him in that role.
As I hear that, Seth, I think, so is he Colin Sexton? Because that's what I feel like I'm hearing from Wasserman.
Well, I mean, he shot 34% from three-point range. I mean, he wasn't terrible. He averaged 3 a game. That's not high. It's not low. He showed you, and again, he was hurt. Very difficult to be a starting point guard in the Pac-12 at a high major level for anybody. You have to learn how to play a different game. You're used to coming out of high school, AAU, where you can do whatever you want with the basketball. You can just physically overpower people. It's not so easy. At that level, he had a lot to figure out. He had the injury issues. If you look at his last 7 or 8 games of the season, there were definitely stretches, and I mean long stretches, and even a couple of games there when he got healthy, and it was like, oh, so that's why he was ranked at the top of all those mock drafts. That's why he was the number 1 prospect coming out of high school. So the fact that, it's funny, Was, it's like we sort of have this narrative where if they don't live up to what we all said he should be, somehow it's the player's fault, right? And so the idea that he's the next to the last pick of the first round here doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, I think, if you're talking about projecting, if you're talking about taking A.J. Johnson, I don't know what A.J. Johnson has showed you to indicate that he's a better going to be an NBA player than Isaiah Collier. The kid is 19 years old. He's going to get a lot better. He's going to work very hard at that shooting piece. You hear great things about his work ethic and his character. So I'm with you. I think we probably overthought it in terms of rating him as high as we did coming into the college basketball season. But now we're certainly, these scouts, I think, are overthinking it, letting him fall
Seth,
this late.
We have to address the monster in the room.
Yes.
I just saw your hands.
Yes.
Your hands were on the screen.
Yeah.
And then you tweeted this while your hands were on the screen.
Right.
You're not running your own social media account. It's the only way. Every mock draft last fall had Isaiah Collier at 1. Seems like a very long time ago. I'm wondering if you have the voice to text thing going on, the voice to tweet. I see your hands right now. Does another tweet just pop up on the screen? Like, what's going on here?
I mean, is that Kelsey back there following do I have to block her from, am I like, listen, I can't have, by the way, I always say my opinions are only as valid for as long as it takes me to say them. So I might have a different opinion 5 minutes from now. But I tweeted that right before. It just strikes me, and honestly, like, I'm a big empathy guy. Like, these poor kids, he's had to sit there for 3 hours. Kyle Filipowski is still sitting there. ESPN is showing them, it's like, I know it's part of the narrative and the suffering. This is supposed to be the greatest night of their lives. Even Dalton Connect, as he was second in the draft. I mean, it's this is the point where it's kind of hard, and I think they kind of stopped showing these guys in the green room. But it's not easy. It's not easy.
All right, let's see the big board one last time. The reigning champions are on the clock. Who's going to the Boston Celtics? I'm going to go Kyle Filipowski. Who you got, Wasserman?
Yeah, I mean, he's the best prospect I got on the board, right? And I think at 30, there's no way Boston probably thought that he'd be available, and I'm sure they had some targets here at 30, but you have to kind of improvise here and play on the fly, unless they're with the other 29 teams who just don't think his game translates very well to the NBA. I have him taking Jonathan Mobo from San Francisco, but I thought Kyle Filipowski would be gone. Although now I'm rechecking my mock draft, and I do have Filipowski going in the second round at 32. So I don't know.
I think
This pick could go in any direction.
you had Tyler Kolek going to the Celtics here, didn't you? In your mock draft.
I had Kolek going. No,
Oh, look at that.
Knicks taking Kolek and Shireman.
Well, Shireman to the Celtics at number 30. Draft day 1 is over, on to day 2. So, Wasserman, your final, what do you think about Shireman to the Celtics?
I mean, this is just, again, a value pick. I think if you just don't worry about upside and you're thinking more about, okay, how can I get value on a cheap contract? I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that soon to be 24-year-old Shireman could come in and make threes for you and move the ball and make good decisions. He's tough. He grabs, I think for his career, over 8 boards a game. And so, I mean, I think he's your classic connector. And connectors are easy to fit in, right? He'll spot up off the ball. On the ball, I think he can make good decisions with his passing. He's also very skilled and very crafty. He's got a ton of experience in college basketball. And so, if you're the Celtics, you're not really focused on upside. I think you're just trying to find value, a guy who can give you 15 minutes or give you a surefire skill on a rookie deal. And there isn't a more proven shot maker in the draft than Shireman. I'm sure he's made more threes over the course of his career than anybody else in this class.
Yeah, great points. I know you got to go, Wasserman. You have another show to do for another couple of hours. So we appreciate you hanging out with us here on the Bleacher Report NBA Draft. Thanks, my friend.
Good work, Was.
All right, Seth, you and I still have to talk some more. First round is over. I look at your Washington Wizards. They had 3 picks, Alice Sarr, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about those second 2, but I really like the first one. So we'll start with your Wizards. Winners or losers tonight?
Well, I would call the Wizards one of the winners of tonight because of Alex Sarr. I thought Alex Sarr was the best player in this draft. I think he had the best combination of somebody who can help you this year and get a lot better. Most of the picks in the first round were one or the other, and I thought that he had the best combination. I think the other picks that they had were kind of throwaway picks. I don't think either one of those will be high-impact NBA players, so maybe they'll still be in the Cooper Flag Ace Bailey sweepstakes a year from now. I loved Donovan Clingan at 7. I think he was a guy who fell into Portland's lap a little bit. And in a way, the fact that they already had a DeAndre Ayton there, they took him anyway, shows how much they like him, and now it gives them some maneuverability, although who says you can't have 2 bigs? I mean, I think both those guys have the ability to move a little bit away from the basket, Clingan in particular. So I think that's someone who jumps out at me. The Sacramento Kings picking Devin Carter is the other one, by the way. Again, stylistically, I think.
Hold on, Seth.
Fit. Yeah, what's up?
You're burying the lead here.
What's that?
We know who you want as your biggest winner, the Los Angeles Lakers. Dalton Connect.
My Los Angeles Lakers, a better version of J.J. Redick now coming out to SoCal, and he'll have a little bit something to prove, little chip on his shoulder. No way Dalton Connect should have fallen to 17. It's just malpractice. It's one of the more surprising falls in the draft that I can remember. I'm sure there are other examples if you want to throw them out at me, but certainly that's one that comes to mind. The Lakers grabbing my guy Dalton Connect.
Tweets coming your way, my friend. Rob Pelinka and Dalton Connect. We'd have never imagined a player as skilled and sort of perfect for our needs was there for us. We had him as a top 10 player unanimously on our scouting boards. And, we have to agree because I thought Dalton Connect might be a top 5 pick, right? I kind of looked as he would be the guy that upset the apple cart in a lot of mock drafts. And then once we got to like 8, 9, 10, and I started going, hold on, the Hornets, what are you guys doing? Salon, Dalton Connect sitting right there. You need shooters to go with LaMelo Ball, right? Like, we started to get positions. So I got to ask you this. We know Connect's a winner, right? We know the Lakers are winners. You said the Kings are winners. Who are losers for passing on Dalton Connect here? We just look at this today and you go, what are you guys doing? Who are your losers?
Well, I know you guys love Ron Holland, so I don't want to upset you here, Chris, but for a team like the Pistons, only because they're so horrific offensively, I think Ron Holland's going to be a solid NBA player. I do think the shooting piece, I would expect it to come around in time, but he wasn't just like an average three-point shooter, okay? He was a mid-20% three-point shooter in a league where he certainly had plenty of opportunities to play an open-style, NBA-style game as opposed to what he would have gotten in college. But, in my mind, there's no question what the worst pick of the first round was, and that was the Grizzlies taking Zach Edey at 9.
Oh.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big, Kyle, and again, I love Zach Edey, and I think there's a place for him in the NBA. But when you look at Zach Edey versus Kyle Filipowski, what does Zach Edey bring that Kyle Filipowski doesn't? I mean, a few more inches, but in terms of stylistically and their ability to play at the NBA level, just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, frankly. Other than that, I don't think there are any really bad picks at the middle to the end of the first round. I think, again, it's what's your philosophy as a franchise? Do you need somebody right away? Are you looking for a positional fit? Are you making moves that protect your contract structure and the trades and the free agent signings that you're going to try to make both this year and in the next 2 to 3 years as these contracts expire? So, to me, that's the kind of the guessing game of the late first round. But there are still some very good players. I think off the top of my head, Kyle Filipowski is the one that really comes to mind that someone's going to get a really good player early in the second round.
All right, guessing game so that the next time I get into the car service or the train at the airport or wherever I'm going, that I can just take this clip from you. Bronny James is going where on day 2 of the NBA?
He's going to be picked by the Los Angeles Lakers. It's done. It's done. I'm not going to put it in Sharpie because that's playing with fire, but it's a little odd now. I mean, I like the kid. I think very highly of him on a personal level. I think projecting into the future, there's no reason to think that he can't become a legitimate NBA player, but he's not there now. He doesn't have a position. He doesn't have the size to play that position. Another guy, by the way, who's going to hear his name called tomorrow night is Enrique Freeman, a great story from Akron. No scholarship offers out of high school. Went to Akron on an academic scholarship, played intramural ball. They had open tryouts for some guys on the scout team. He wasn't going to do it. Some buddies encouraged him to try out. He tried out. John Gross said, hey, let's throw him on the scout team. Played a total of 13 minutes as a freshman, and by the time he was a fifth-year senior, led the nation in rebounds, conference player of the year, and he will be a second-round draft pick tomorrow night. I'm very confident in that, and a great story and a great kid.
Well, I know you're great at marathons because this has been a marathon show with you, my friend.
No commercials. I'm not used to this, bro, and neither are you.
Commercial-free C. Miles. That's going to be my new nickname. That's Seth Davis. Thanks again to Jonathan Wasserman and his mock draft and putting everything together. For Kat, for Kelsey, thank you for hanging out with us here on the Bleacher Report app and the NBA draft coverage.